Yo, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back. It is a brand new episode of Liam's First Look. This week on the show, we're going to be going over UFC Atlanta. So I appreciate everybody who's rocking with us. We haven't been doing the first look as often lately, but I'm excited for this card. You know, a lot of these fight nights, they kind of phone it in. I feel like we're getting a pretty good offering here. So on the first look, I'm going to be doing this stream solo. We're going to be rocking with the sharpest chat in the game. So anything that you guys want to say about these matchups, go ahead and fire away. But where we're going to start on the first look is with the main event of the evening. And guys, we've got none other than Kamaru Usman, the Nigerian Nightmare. It's been a little while since we've seen our man, but he's back in the driver's seat. He's got a main event opportunity. Problem is, it's across from Joaquim Buckley, a guy who's been on an absolute tear in the welterweight division. And as far as I'm concerned, he's the man to beat right now in this matchup. He's the deserved favorite. So let's get into it all, guys, beginning with this main event. Shout out to the chat. Shout out to, we got Mayor of Midville rocking with us. Gray Span is in the chat as well. MMA Foo said that he had a pretty good weekend at UFC 316. So unlike myself, I'm trying to get right, my brother. Dixon says, moment of silence for Patchy Mix. Absolutely brutal. We were devastated to watch that one. One of the worst watches in my UFC fandom. And I truly believe that was an underperformance relative to my expectations. I tried to tell you guys I was not objective about that fight because I'm a huge fan of Patchy Mix, and I was just gutted for him, man. I do feel he's better than what he showed that night, but ultimately it's all still left to prove for our guy Patchy Mix. But that being said, guys, we will start in earnest with UFC Atlanta. And then at the end of the show, once we've gotten through our first look, I will talk some UFC 316. I'll talk about, maybe some matchmaking as well for some future stuff that we're looking at from those fighters, those winners and losers from last night. So I think that that's interesting, but we'll do it on the back end of this, guys. First of all, let's get Tapology up on the screen here so that way we have a source of reference. I'll also be looking at the odds over on fightodds.io tonight, just to give us a good look. But here you guys see the fight card. Obviously, we've got two former UFC champions in, pretty meaningful fights right up at the top. Rose Namajunas, former champion. Kamaru Usman, former champion. Joaquim Buckley, Miranda Maverick, relevant contenders in their division. So the top two fights on the bill, I think, are pretty impeccable here. And then the question is, what's the rest of the card? So we got plenty of good stuff to deal with. Shout out to our guy Monotone in the chat, one of the sharpest out there. My guy, I'm glad to see you back. And my guy Gray in the chat says, I think Buckley might finish Usman. So let's get into it, man. Let's get into this first fight of the night. Kamaru Usman, Joaquim Buckley, new Mansa. This guy's been on an absolute freaking tear in the division, guys. And when you look, the quality of this win streak is also something impressive. So let's go to Buckley's Tapology first. And let's talk about where he's at. He's 11-4 in the UFC. Colby Covington. Last time out, we predicted him to get the win via TKO. He got the win via TKO. Then you look at Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. Man, that was an impressive knockout. He comes forward and puts Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, a guy who's very difficult to put away. I think it's him and Anthony Pettis that have gotten those clean knockouts. It's very few and far between. So for me, very quality win. Even though he's a little bit older, how do you normally get to Thompson? You have to wrestle him. You have to grapple him. You have to take him down. And to get him cold cocked out on the feet, that's an impressive win. Nursultan Ruziboyev, he's a guy that's gotten a lot of wins under his belt now in the UFC. He's shown he's at this level. Vicente Luque made him quit to ground and pound, man. It was a vicious stoppage from Buckley. He was ready to rain it down on him. He was doing the dance at the pool the night before. The guy seems like he's ready for prime time. Then you look at Alex Morono. Another quality welterweight. Am I saying he's a world beater? No, but he's a guy who's stuck around for a long time, a guy who's had a real career in the UFC, gotten wins, fought relevant guys. Then you look at Andre Fialho. I mean, that guy does not have the greatest chin you've ever seen, but treated him accordingly, right? Took him out, finished him in that fight. So, man, that was the brotherhood of the traveling head kicks. If y'all remember, he knocks out Fialho. He got knocked out when he was at 185 pounds against Alessio Di Chirico. That was a traveling gimmick of head kicks for a while in the middleweight division. I think Zach Cummings got him, the fight before. But, when you just look at this guy, he hasn't lost since a 185-pound bout against Chris Curtis. Need I remind you guys, he was kind of fighting a little bit, frantic in that fight against Curtis. But he was having some success. He was putting some shots on the guard of Chris Curtis and forcing him to be quite defensive throughout that contest. And then all of a sudden, Chris Curtis puts one big hook on him, put him down for the count, and that was all that she wrote. So I do believe that, at 185 pounds, Buckley had a very clear ceiling, which is he's just not the biggest guy out, but at 170 pounds, this guy's big, strong. He can defend takedowns. He can get takedowns when he needs them. He's a real problem for a lot of these guys. And when you look at his body type, he's a difficult guy to get a hold of, right? He's got a big ass back, right? So you look at a guy like Colby, he normally is out there spamming takedowns, trying to get a hold of people. And, they're trying to get, this guy to the ground. Bro, it's like trying to wrestle a tree. The guy's just got this huge body. So he's difficult to get a hold of. He's difficult to wrestle. And then on the feet, he's fast. He's aggressive. He's athletic. He's dynamic. Think back. What's the greatest knockout in UFC history? I mean, your mileage may vary, but there's no more aesthetically pleasing knockout to this man's eye than the one that he got when he catches the kick, right? Impa Kasanganai holding him up in the air. He does a turn, spin, jump kick. Dude, he kicked Impa, into a frozen, fall of solitude. It was absolutely unbelievable. So I think that this guy has been putting together aesthetic knockouts for a long time. He's done it to 185ers. He's done it to big guys. And then you look at the losses, a lot of times it's against credible 185-pound guys that are serious fighters, difficult outs, guys with a lot of experience. So I really believe that we've seen Buckley evolve over time. Even you look at the fact, what's his name? I'm trying to think, Duraev, right? I bet Buckley as a plus 2XX underdog against Albert Duraev. Duraev was so confident he was going to beat Buckley because he'd gone with him in the training room. He's like, bro, I take this guy down. I dog him. I beat him up. It's easy work for me. Then Buckley goes out there. He's sprawling on all his takedowns. He's punching him. He's whatever. And he's like, bro, you didn't think I was going 100%, did you? He's like, no. I have more to give in the fight. And this is what it is. So I think we just saw that Buckley, not only is he a big game player, he's ready to go when the lights shine, but he's also the kind of guy where, he's going out there and accruing more skills over time. He's getting clearly better fight over fight. And so now you've got a young man who I think is in his fighting prime, taking on a guy much like his last opponent, Colby Covington, a very good fighter in his time, a guy who was fighting for belts, a guy who was right up there. But now he's finally seeing this decline where it's notable. And let's go look instead at his opponent for a second, Kamaru, the Nigerian Nightmare Usman, because Usman is 15-3, guys, in the UFC, and he has lost his last 3 fights in a row. So when you look at this guy, he had a career of absolute dominance, a sensational fighter. You look back, he hadn't lost a fight from when he got to the UFC. So you guys know, if you've been around for a while, he comes off the Ultimate Fighter. I think it was American Top Team, right? Against the Black Zillions, I think it was at that time. It's still the Battle of South Florida. You guys know how it goes in MMA. A lot of South Florida fighters. Shout out to Kayla Harrison, just got the belt for American Top Team. Another one, they just stacked on top. They're very, very good fighters over there at American Top Team. But if you go back and look at that season, the Nigerian Nightmare, Kamaru Usman, was running through the Ultimate Fighter. He comes out, he finishes Hader Hassan, makes it look easy. He fights Leon Edwards, a fight that is long since forgotten, and he beats him, right? That was an impressive win. It aged very well, right? Then you look at the fact he goes on, he fights Yakovlev, a decent one. Warley Alves, fine win. Sean Strickland, I mean, what can I say? The guy goes on to be a world champion at another weight class. Sergio Moraes knocks him out. Emil Meek defeats him by decision. At the time, guys, Emil Meek had a lot of hype. I will say that. Damian Maia, good win. At any time you can beat Damian Maia, good win. Rafael Dos Anjos, clearly, takes a little bit away that he was a former lightweight, but look at what RDA did against Colby Covington at the time. When he was in his prime, he was still having a lot of success at 170 pounds, and people should not forget that. Was he undersized? Yes. Was he a quality threat? Yes, he was. Then you look at the Tyron Woodley fight. I posted this the other day. If you guys aren't following me over on X, I encourage you to do that at LiamPicksFights. I try to keep it relevant about fighting and keep it, interesting for you guys. But in any case, I did tweet out the other day, think of the most dominant title-winning performance. And I don't mean title defense, because you could start throwing that Marab performance in over the weekend, right? Rest in peace to Sean O'Malley. That was an absolute assault by the champion. But when you look at where we're at, this is the kind of situation where Tyron Woodley was revered, right? People were talking about this guy is GSP. This guy is the next great champion. This guy is going to hold it down in 170 pounds. And if you guys remember, Usman had done the UFC like a favor where he shows up and he was the backup fighter. He did everything right professionally. So everybody was protesting the fact he was getting this title fight. Let's look at the odds for that fight against Tyron Woodley. He goes off as a plus 155 underdog. So that means there were sharp dollars on this guy that people weren't really expecting much from, Kamaru Usman, because I remember the fan base was not happy about this one. And Usman goes out there, and when I say washed him, I mean washed him. Just pillar to post, 5-round whooping, 50-44 on 2 of the judges' scorecards. I mean, just an absolute drubbing to take the title from another champion. Unbelievable. And that really showed who Kamaru Usman was. That was like the best fight, in my opinion, of his career. Did he go on to have success with the hands? Did he go on to have other, impressive performances? Yes, he did. But in my opinion, this was the absolute pinnacle of Usman, and it was in 2019. Then you go back and look. Okay, he then beats Colby Covington. That was a much more competitive fight. Colby had some moments. He had some minutes. He had some success. But at the end of the day, the power differential was what won out. You just saw Usman could tank the shots that were coming back at him. He did not respect the power that was coming from the Colby Covington side. He was minus 225 favorite. Man, he goes out there, he does what he needs to do, gets the win, puts Colby away late. Colby obviously was not happy about that stoppage. Then you go on. Okay, Jorge Masvidal goes out there and kind of puts on a lackluster decision, but he took that one on short notice. He's supposed to fight Gilbert Burns. Then he goes out there, he knocks out Gilbert Burns. And in that fight, he kind of got buzzed up by a jab early. He's kind of getting, or actually, no, it was Gilbert that gets hurt by the jab. Excuse me. It was a overhand right, I think it was, from Gilbert that kind of wobbled him a little bit, had him a little bit hurt early in that fight. But we saw, again, the chin, the durability, the willingness to keep pushing forward, to go through adversity. Usman was a champion, right? He had the championship heart. He did so many things right. Then you look at the Masvidal fight. Again, kind of a lower level title defense as things go, but he does what he needs to do. He improves on the result, right? What did Merab Dvalishvili do that was so impressive that puts him into bantamweight GOAT status? He improved on a performance against a championship level fighter, against a great fighter, right? He goes out there, does what he needs to do the first time to get the win. Second time, absolutely dominates him, leaves no doubt. Then you look at, okay, the Masvidal fight, first time out, he wins, but he left just enough doubt. And then he goes out there and absolutely nukes him with a right hand. One of the most picturesque knockouts of the year. Hits him. The guy falls onto his shoulder. It was absolutely incredible. So you have to give him credit for that. I mean, brilliant knockout. Then the Colby Covington rematch again. Goes out there, proves his point. Does what he needs to do. The Leon fight is where it all starts to go off the rails, right? He does a good job. He's cage pushing. He's doing the right thing. But almost in the same way that people like myself were criticizing Merab, if you're going to be out there for 25 minutes, you're going to give guys opportunities. So what does Merab do? He goes out there, he closes the show early. In this fight against Leon Edwards, he had been dominated in the first round, which I do think people, kind of memory hole and forget. He got taken down, flat backed into the full mount, right? We saw a full mount from Leon there, and Leon kind of just clung to him, right? Didn't do too much, but just did enough to win the round. Then you see rounds 2, 3, 4. Just rinse, repeat, cage push, take him down, get him on the fence, beat him up. The Kamaru Usman classic, right? And then in round 5, referee separates him. The head kick heard around the world, cashed me a huge ticket. Massive fan of that knockout by Leon, but it was a little bit out there on the risk curve. You can't expect a 5th round knockout every time. It was a big comeback knockout victory. Awesome to see. Then we see Leon Edwards, the rematch, right? And this is where people expect, like last time, Usman lost focus. He didn't keep to the game plan. This time he's going to have it on lock. And he goes out there against Leon and he loses again, right? And this time his wrestling's less successful. And Leon's able to keep it up on the feet a lot more and pick away at him and use the low kicks. And I felt like Usman looked a little bit regressed, even at that time. And now that was in 2023. So we look back at this chain, guys, and this guy went from fighting very often. We look at these fights. 2018, he fights 1, 2, 3, 4 times, right? Then comes out 2019, fights 2 times. 2020, fights 3 times. 2021, fights 3 times. Then 2022, 2023, he fights twice, and we haven't seen him since. So the guy has not been very active in this recent run in his career. And let's talk about the most recent fight, Khamzat Chimaev. I picked Khamzat Chimaev to win that fight via submission in the first round. And I thought he was well on his way to doing just that. He gets on his back. He's dominating physically. And Usman from a standing position, basically, makes a calculated decision. He's like, hey, I'm going to try and fall with this guy, try and slam him, because right now I'm in a compromised spot. I don't want to continue to hold him up with all his weight on my back and try and hold this 185-pound big man up on my back all night. So he decides, like, hey, I'm going to try and jump with this guy. And he jumps. And, everybody's natural instinct, if you guys have ever grappled, you know what I'm talking about. We work on break falls and all these things because you don't want to post out on your hand anytime you don't have to, or you could break your elbow, you could break your arm. We saw it with Joe Pyfer, as an example, back when he fought Dustin Stoltzfus, right? He based out on his hand when he's coming down and he broke his arm. And, Chimaev, natural reaction, based out on his hand because Usman out of nowhere just slams him forward and he hurt himself. And so from that point forward, I thought we were seeing like the midst of a 10-8 round for Chimaev forming. Then he hurts his wrist, elbow, hand, whatever it was. I'm not exactly sure, but I do believe it. I'm confident that he hurt himself in that sequence. And then we saw him kind of put it in cruise control. People said it could have been a draw. I agree that it could have been a draw. It was one of those fights where Chimaev definitely came out and dominated the first round. The second and the third, they were toss-up rounds at best, and Usman was having some success. He was coming forward. He was having some success striking. I think that part of that was an adrenaline type of dump. I think Chimaev thought he had the fight won. Then he was thinking, oh, my God, I'm injured. How am I going to deal with this now for the next 10 minutes or so that I'm out here locked in this cage with a champion? And I truly believe that, Usman had a chance to win that one, but when it didn't come through, it's very tough for him. Do you want to count out a guy with this kind of championship medal? No, certainly not. It would be foolish to just count him out. But we just have to talk about it, realistically. And when I look at this fight on paper, 38 years of age for Usman, right? We've talked about it 100 times if we've talked about it once. Fighters over the age of 38, it's like a graph that you look at, right, in the book Fightnomics, and it's like like it's a very natural progression, like slowly, and then it hits 38, and it just shoots off the charts. The rate at which these fighters, older fighters, tend to get knocked out, and it's not through any fault of their own, right? It's the natural aging process. There's a truism, right? Fighting is a young man's game. It's not universally true, but it's been true for a long time. That's why it becomes part of the parlance. And now you look at the modern era of UFC champions, one thing that you have to be very clear about, there's only one champion in their 20s right now. His name is Jack Della Maddalena. Salute to him. Welterweight, stand up. Y'all got a young champion. Everybody else is over 30. And it's kind of, an interesting trend to watch. I think Volkanovski is the oldest champion in the UFC. Don't quote me, but excuse me. John Jones is the oldest champion in the UFC, but he doesn't fight anymore. So I don't know why we're talking about that guy. But in any case, we've got, who's active, who's still in the game, right? And I think Volk is the oldest champion right now. He did lose his belt, and then the guy who beat him vacated, gave it back to him basically. So Volk is the oldest champion, and he did get defeated by a 20-year-old. I do think that's important to note as well. However, when you look at a lot of these guys, they're getting to the point where turnover, in my humble opinion, is required. And what I mean by that is the natural process of younger fighters replacing older fighters. People have talked about this cycle before and how it failed at lightweight. They basically gave, Fiziev and a few of these guys opportunities to step up. Gamrot to take out a Dan Hooker, to take out, a Gaethje and these guys, and they were unable to do it. And that's the natural turnover of a division. Usually the young guys come in and beat the old guys. They take their spots, and it's not supposed to be like, a bad thing. It's supposed to be the natural turnover of the business, right? Everybody comes in, a young man looking for their opportunity, and everybody leaves the business face down and embarrassed, as Chael Sonnen would say, right? It's a sad reality, but that's normally the way it goes. George St. Pierre and certain guys stand out because they do not fit the bill, right? They broke the mold, but most guys, they stay until they can't fight at this level anymore. They find out in the cage, and then they leave. And when you look at a guy like Usman, he's not going to take no for an answer lying down, right? This is a champion. This is a guy who won 15 fights in a row in the UFC. But now he's lost 3 in a row. And momentum is a hard thing to deal with, right? You look at a guy like Buckley. He's been winning. Winning is becoming a habit for this guy. He knows what winning looks like. He knows the win condition. And for Usman, I think that the win condition has started to slowly elude him. And I'll talk about what I mean. Usman in his prime, there's nobody he's saying, I can't wrestle this guy if I want to. I truly believe that the Colby Covington performance, it was a little bit about ego. He was like, I know I can bang with this guy on the feet. Fuck the wrestling. I'm not even going to try wrestling this guy. I'm going to beat him up. But if he had wanted to wrestle with Colby, I think he could have had some success. He's a guy that had great cardio. He's a guy that's very physically strong, stronger physically than Colby, in my opinion. So I think he could have had success with a wrestling game plan. He went out there to strike with him. A lot of the time, though, in his early career, you knew exactly what Kamaru Usman was going to do. The Marab, so to speak, right? Have a lot of cardio, except here's the difference. Marab tries to mix in more takedowns, in open space, more open space striking to kicks. And he's a little bit more diverse in his arsenal. But Usman would box. He would push you back to the fence. He would beat you up in the clinch, and he would take you down. It was a mix between what you saw from Andreas Gustafsson and Merab Dvalishvili that made prime Kamaru Usman so special. He was going to come forward, push you into the fence, hold on to you, be more physical, be gritty, know how to wrestle you, and have a lot of success there. And I think that when you age, one thing that's hard to maintain is wrestling. Guys, a lot of wrestlers in the UFC start falling in love with their hands. And it's not just because, knocking people out is fun, though that's a part of it, right? For a lot of these guys, they're like, bro, knockouts are just, I'm looking for that feeling. I love that feeling. But for a lot of these guys, their knees start to get destroyed. I could just tell you, my knees don't always feel great every day. And I am not a UFC level athlete. I'm not a guy that's put myself through the same things that they have. Kamaru Usman wrestled at world levels, in terms of tournaments and going out there and competing at high levels. So what he's done, what he's given to the sport is already immense before he gets to MMA. Then in MMA, he gives everything, every fight, every time out, putting his body on the line, putting himself through whatever he needs to in training camp, make it to 4 fights in a year, do whatever it takes. But your body starts to break down and, abandon you over time, especially when you put it through so much. One of the most publicly documented guys who's been riddled with injuries in the UFC is Kamaru Usman. Right? His knees have been destroyed for years. He's been walking downstairs backwards and all these. It's like you feel for the guy, right? Nothing but sympathy. But his body is basically destroyed. And so he's found all these ways to work around it. How do I get better on the feet so I don't need to take everybody down? And he started having success with that. But the problem is when you're using your theoretical B game, right, which would be your striking, to go out there and try and beat somebody whose A game is their striking, in a guy like Buckley, that's going to be a difficult out. So then the question is, can he wrestle? And in my opinion, his knees are busted up. So it's going to be very difficult. And on the other side, Buckley is a big physical guy himself. He's not going to be small for this weight class. He was a small 185er. He's a big welterweight. So he's going to come into this fight. And let's go ahead and look at the dynamics. So 7 years younger, right? He's going to be a little bit shorter than Usman, same reach. So one thing I could also tell you guys about wrestling, when you're trying to shoot underneath somebody and they're shorter than you and they've got a big body and they've got wide hips and they got a pretty good sprawl game like Buckley, man, you're starting to deal with a lot of factors. If we're in the UFC Apex, it's 3-4 steps and you got to push back against the fence. Now we're talking about, Atlanta, right? I'm expecting a big cage. I'll have to look into this deeper, but my anticipation, because the UFC's on the road, is that this is going to be a big cage. So you've got a guy like Buckley who has footwork and, lateral movement because he's young and mobile and still has both of his knees functioning. And you have a guy in Kamaru Usman who I'm not very confident is going to be able to move his feet. So for me, that's a big difference in this contest. They talk about in boxing a lot more than in MMA, a guy losing his legs. And that means their ability to move and be springy for the whole fight. Keep bouncing, keep mobility, keep being able to step, move. One of the criticisms that people had for Patchy Mix last night that I thought was fair was he was extremely flat-footed. And it's not to say that there are no flat-footed styles that can work, but if you're going to be flat in your feet, everything else has to be moving, right? Your head has to be getting off the center line. Otherwise, you become an easy target. So if I have flat feet, I have to have really responsible defensive elements everywhere else, right? Like my movement has to be on point. My shoulder rolls have to be on point. I have to be blocking shots with big, meaty parts of my body that I can take damage on, as opposed to getting hit in my soft, flesh tissue in my face, right? So it's just A guy like Buckley, look at how he's built. He keeps up a high guard. He's got freaking massive shoulders, massive lats, and he can just turn out and put a lot of shots on big, meaty parts of your body that can absorb that kind of damage. And I think that those attributes are really helpful for him, right? Like if you look at how he blitzes against Wonder Boy, that's a lot of what he's doing, man. He's going like putting shoulder in, and then coming forward with big hooks. That's hard to deal with, man. Like how do you hit him in that exchange? You got to either pick an uppercut or you've got to be moving backwards and looking to go up the center line. It's like he's applying pressure with really good calculated movements that integrate the defense. So he's hitting while he's being hard to hit a lot of the time. And I think that is what makes Buckley special. You know, you saw a guy like Chris Curtis was able to snipe him out, but he has middleweight power and he was very patient and he was blocking a lot on his guard. And he was, you know, being very willing to engage in those striking exchanges to create opportunity. And I think that when you talk about a 38-year-old who's coming in off of a very long layoff and their knees aren't going so well against a springy, athletic, dynamic puncher who can also kick you in the face if you grab his leg, it's like there's a lot of things that just start to add up for me that are massive advantages on the Buckley side. I think the motivation is there. I think the skills are there. I think the mindset is there. So for me, I really like Buckley in this fight. Before doing a deeper tape study, I will always do my tape study, my due diligence over the course of the week. I will be doing things like stalking their Instagrams, trying to find any little nugget of information that I can that would influence me one way or the other in terms of where I think it is a smart investment strategy. But when I look at, you know, how I view this fight, I view this fight as a showcase opportunity for Buckley, a guy that has a real personality, that is young enough in this game that he could still go on and have 15 more fights in the UFC. You know, as crazy as that sounds, he's 31. You know, on the other side, I see a guy who's given his best to the UFC already, and all I can expect from him is a regression towards the mean because of his age, because of the accrued miles, because of the damage, because of the layoff. There's like 10 different factors for me that make me think the version I expect of Usman is a lesser version than his best. I thought his best was in 2019. So the only thing that I could expect is him to go down over time. This guy at his peak was a top pound for pound fighter. And I think most people would agree he's not there right now. So if he's not a top pound for pound fighter right now, it must mean that he's not the same guy or the sport passed him by. I don't think the sport passed him by. I just think he's not the same guy. I think he's a lesser version of himself. He's on a 3-fight losing streak. And you have on the other side a guy, he's 5-0 in his last 5 fights. That's something to take note of, right? We've got a guy who's 2-3 in his last 5 fights against a guy who's 5-0 in his last 5 fights. And that's not to say they're 1-to-1, right? You always have to look at the quality of competition and everything else. Usman's been fighting the best of the best. But then you start looking through his win streak and you go, wait a second. Like, wait, Buckley beat that guy too. Or Buckley beat a guy who's kind of younger and fresher and maybe does a better version of that. I feel like the run we've seen from Buckley lately is more impressive to me than the run we've seen from Usman. How about this? Leon Edwards knocked out Kamaru Usman. Then he beat him by decision. How good has he looked since? I think that answers some questions too, because that for me is a different generation of welterweight. And one thing I want to go do is really quickly, I'm going to pull up something from my navigation document. And my navigation document for this card is not yet done, but I have been working on it today because I want to get that ball rolling for this next event. But let's see here. I went on my guy Dan Levy's show. So shout out to my guy Dan Levy. Shout out to Half the Battle. If you guys are familiar, awesome. If you're not, I would encourage you guys to go check it out. We have an annual tradition where we come on and do bold predictions, right? So we come on and we try and come up with bold predictions for the whole year. And, you know, it's hard to do, right? Sometimes we swing and miss, but sometimes we get some really prescient opinions and analysis as well. So when I look at my list for this year, right, I want to see where it's at so I can make sure that I get this. Yeah, here it is, guys. So bear with me. I am just a tech Luddite. I hope this is on our screen. Yeah, it is. All right, perfect. So if you look here, guys, number 6 on the list for my bold predictions, welterweight turnover. Muhammad, Usman, and Edwards take loss in 2025. Now, this was just my notes for the prediction show. It's not a perfectly written document. However, when you look at why, look at my simple analysis. Usman, 37 years of age. Muhammad, 36 years of age. Edwards, 33 years of age. Look at all those new contenders. By the way, guys, Prates, Morales, Ian Gary. Prates' only loss is Ian Gary. Morales hasn't lost. Ian Gary, this close to beating Shavkat. Buckley, Brady, JDM, and Shavkat. It's their time. And I truly believe that. I think welterweight is due for turnover. And when I, predicted this, Edwards hadn't taken the loss yet. He didn't get dominated by Sean Brady like what happened. Who's on the list? When I talked about Bilal Muhammad, it was before he had gotten his face rearranged by Jack Della Maddalena, who's on the list. So it's not disrespect to any of these guys. When they were these same guys, young guys coming up, hungry, looking for championship belts, they were doing the same thing to great fighters. That's how the game works. And for me, right now, Buckley's got next. New Mansa is going to knock out Kamaru Usman, in my humble opinion. And that's that. So I can tell you what my opinion is. I can't tell you whether or not my opinion will be right, but that's my opinion. And I'm pretty bullish on that opinion. It would take some real revelations in my tape study to get me to change my mind on this fight, because a lot of times I get a gut feeling when a fight is announced. Sometimes it's right, sometimes it's wrong, but you can go paralysis by analysis, think about something too much and cloud your judgment. I was very confident when I heard that this fight was announced, that this was set up so Buckley can go out there and let people know what time it is. Whether or not he's able to deliver, that's on him. But I think that this is his fight to lose. So go ahead and give me Buckley via knockout in the main event. Shout out to my guy Daz Files in the chat, one of the OGs, one of the sharp guys in this community, says smash the like button. Appreciate you very much. My guy Gray says great point on the Leon fights. I appreciate you, my man. Try and give unique analysis. And the thing to think about is, where is Leon looking? He's looking a little bit past it. He's looking a little bit washed. He's looking a little bit gone physically. He's the youngest guy on that list, but he's from the same generation, guys. He's been fighting for a long time in the UFC against high-level guys, and it's grating. It's exhausting. This guy, Buckley, has a lot of UFC experience, but he's way younger, and he's ready right now. So I just think that timing is everything in mixed martial arts. You make this fight 5 years ago, maybe we're having a completely different conversation. Usman's going to run him into the ground. He's going to cage push him. He's going to beat him up. Now you got 38-year-old Usman against 31-year-old Buckley, and it's happening on Saturday. So for me, give me the young man rumble. Shout out to Steffordson, says Buckley, round 3, round 4. Awesome. All right, guys, we're on to the co-main event of the evening. We've got Rose Namajunas, Thug Rose Namajunas taking on Miranda Maverick. And oh boy, guys, I think that when I was going through, I'll just disclose, I haven't looked at the odds for a lot of fights on this card. So a lot of them, we're going to look at them together live in real time, and I'll give you my reaction as I see the odds. This fight, I saw the odds for this fight, maybe 2 weeks back, and I didn't fire because oftentimes underdog prices improve over time. People like to parlay up, a lot of big favorites. So one thing I always do is I'll just sit back and watch a little bit, watch how the market moves. When I look at this fight, I see Miranda Maverick as a very live underdog. I'll just tell you that right off the rip. And the reason I say that is, again, look at the age dynamics. She's 27 years of age. Look at the motivation dynamics. This woman has not fought for a UFC title, but she's, I think, 8-2 in the promotion. If memory serves, that's right off the top of my head. And Rose Namajunas on the other side, guys, I believe she's 11-6 with the promotion. And at her best, at her highest level, she's clearly a UFC championship level fighter. She's gone out there and knocked out the great Zhang Wei Li. She beat her via decision. She's frankly a great fighter at her best. What I would criticize about Rose Namajunas is she's an inconsistent fighter. I think that her cardio is sometimes something that you could call into question. And it's ironic because in some fights, her cardio looks unbelievably good. And then in some fights, her cardio does not look very good. And for me, that's a question of consistency. Then you look at her coaching situation. I don't like it. Trevor Whitman, for me, I could take him or leave him at certain times, but he's clearly worked with a lot of great and championship level fighters. I think he's got weird reactions when his fighters get knocked out. And, I'll save that ramble for another day. But when I look at a Rose Namajunas and she's training with Pat Barry, that for me is not a very bullish situation, just long term. It's hard to be very critical to your spouse, to your loved one. I think we've seen that a number of times in MMA. People will criticize Patchy Mix for having his fiance in his corner. And I'm not saying that I agree or disagree. I've never been out there for a fight and needed a corner, right? So to each their own, right? I personally believe whatever you're most comfortable with, God bless you, good luck. But I just don't love that as a long-term situation. My guy KDO in the chat says Rose is not a flyweight. And this is where I've got to agree with him, right? You look at the height and the reach. She looks like she's a flyweight, but then I look at the physicality. And at 115 pounds, Rose Namajunas was strong. She could bully girls when she needed to. When you look at the Andrade fight, that was one rare example where she, did not have it physically. Look at the Zhang Wei Li fight, where she's able to take her down and muscle her to the ground and do things that she needed to hold on top. I kind of think that Rose Namajunas is a physical force at 115 pounds in ways that she's not at 125 pounds. We saw who has she struggled with, Amanda Hebas, who's a tweener, right, was having some success in the wrestling. How about the fact that Menifield was able to get her, backing up? She broke her finger in that fight. So clearly, things didn't go according to plan. That's obviously something you can't really do much about live in the fight. It's tough sledding, but you look at that fight and, again, the physicality, the size, it was very apparent that they looked different physically. Then you look at, I don't want to be disrespectful. I don't want to talk about women's body image and stuff like that. It's frankly not my place. But what I want to say is that body composition is something that I look for generally in athletes when we're talking about competitions, right? We're talking about an athletic competition. So we're talking about body composition. We're not trying to talk about appearances. We're talking about body composition. Her body composition has looked softer at 125 pounds naturally, right? Because she's just not going to have to cut as much weight. She's not going to have to be in as much of a caloric deficit. On the other side, Miranda Maverick seems like she would not be able to physically make 115 pounds because she is a muscled woman, right? She's a very muscular woman. So when I talk about body composition, you could be 125 pounds at X body fat percentage or Y body fat percentage. You could be 125 pounds and have big, jacked farm girl muscles or not. And I think that Miranda Maverick is very strong physically. I think that Miranda Maverick is getting better, over time. She's had at other points in her life, full-time commitments outside of fighting, going to school, doing other things. She's a woman of many interests. She runs pickle companies and all this stuff, right? But I think at her root, she's a very competitive woman. And she's skilled on the ground. She's physical. She moves people around. And I think that when you look at where she's at in her career, she's on a nice little run now. She's building some momentum. People wanted to criticize her at the time because she lost to Jasmine Jasudavicius. Where's Jasmine at, right? One thing you always have to do is evaluate, how did this age? What does it look like now? I mean, Jasmine Jasudavicius is one fight away from a UFC title opportunity, two at most. So I think that when you look at where she's at, top level girl, proven herself, fight over fight. Right now, she's ready to go. Rose just dropped one to Erin, right? Again, Erin's a great fighter, but is Erin the biggest 125-pound girl? That would be maybe the one thing that people want to hold against her. The Farrell fight, she just didn't look physically like she had enough to take her down, to grab a hold of her, because Manon had good footwork and she's so physically strong. When Erin did try to get a hold of her, Manon picked her up and almost put herself in a guillotine, but she was able to pick her up and turn her sideways, right? Like just a different class of physicality. And Erin was able to go out there and out-physical Rose when she needed to, right? For me, those are the red flags on the Namajunas side. And now we're not talking about, hey, let's decide, it's -110. Who do you think is going to win the fight? It's like you're saying 70% of the time, Rose Namajunas is not going to either A, be inconsistent, B, give up bad positions, get taken down, C, how about the fact that I believe it was Jillian Robertson, she had a grappling match with her and got absolutely served in like a minute and a half. Like, I just think that when we go and start peeling through the layers of this fight, like, would it surprise me if Miranda Maverick won a decision? No, it would not. Would it surprise me if Miranda Maverick, had some success on the feet, like didn't get completely destroyed on the feet? Like, no, that would not stun me. I think she's a powerful enough girl. I think that she could, potentially land with one impactful elbow, change the complexion of the fight. One big head kick, change the complexion of the fight. But also, like, would it surprise me if she takes her down and submits her? Frankly, it would not. So I think that Miranda Maverick is alive to win the fight by several different methods of victory, and she's a big underdog. So for me, I'm going to do my tape study and my due diligence and make sure that I'm not just, blowing smoke up my own ass and, just overreading this. But for me, you've got somebody who's 32, who the best fighting of their career was done a different weight class a few years ago. And now you've got Miranda Maverick on the other side, getting better every time out, who's in her physical prime, who looks extremely motivated, who shows up in shape. Yeah, I think it'll be Miranda Maverick. Besides the main event, I'm more excited for the prelims than the main card. Shout out to my guy Monotone. That's fair play, brother. Rose is not a flyweight. We did talk about that one. Jazzy won clearly, but she didn't go in there and beat her down bad. Yeah, I agree. It was competitive at times, but I did think the right woman won that fight. You just want to see Wellmaker style on Chris for 15 minutes. Hey, 15 minutes or less. You always got to remember that phraseology. That sub in the grappling match was almost sad. I wasn't sure Rose would ever win another fight after I watched that. Yeah, man, it was not a great look. No disrespect to her, right? Anything can happen, right? You can get caught in a mixed martial arts fight, in a grappling match, like anything can happen. So no skin off your nose, right? To the competitor, the man or woman in the arena goes the credit. But ultimately, we have to be evaluating this critically and just say, like, Rose at her competitive, fiery peak, I don't know that happens to her. And that happened, and she didn't seem all that torn up about it. So for me, I just think that, she's at a different point in her career. She wants to go out there, continue to compete, continue to keep herself fresh, continue to make money. But am I seeing the same hunger, championship level commitment? No, I'm not seeing that personally. All right, next up. We're going to start moving through these a little bit quicker, guys, because I really was fired up about the main and co-main event. The rest of the card, it's good, but it's certainly a little bit of drop-off in quality. So this fight, I will tell you guys, is a fight that makes me sick in some ways, but also could present financial opportunity in other ways. The truth is, if this fight goes 7.5 minutes, it probably means Andre Petroski won it or is going to win it. He is a guy that used to have extremely bad cardio. His cardio is not a selling point, but his ability to win rounds, minutes, positions, situations is something that you just have to keep note of. His team has been extremely successful in the UFC. Marquez MMA, extremely successful in the UFC. You could love or hate them. I tweeted this out yesterday because Joe Pyfer went out there, got another win. You could love or hate these guys from Philly, but you certainly got to respect them and the body of work. Otherwise, you're just not paying attention because these guys are putting together a ton of wins in the promotion. Pat Sabatini, another guy. It's like you watch how they grapple, how they compete. They're smothering. They're dominating on top. Edmund Shahbazyan is, 10 shades of shit. If he is getting grappled by Petroski in the first round, it's like you might as well just count it out because when you look at Petroski, he's a guy that will wear you down by being heavy on top of you, by knowing positionally exactly what to do, and by not caring about the fact that people will boo him and people will not like to see how he fights. He does not care. He is willing to just do it. And there's a difference, in my opinion, between being a guy that gets the fight to the ground and is looking to finish the fight, whether you do or not, you're looking to finish the fight, or a guy who's looking for control and dominance. I think Petroski's looking for control and dominance. And when you're talking about money lines, when you're talking about who's going to win the fight, guys that fight with good strategies to win have a better chance to win, right? Like Petroski has a good strategy for winning a lot of MMA fights, which is going out there, taking people down, holding them down, not giving them a chance to hurt him, and winning the fight. The danger is he's had some sketchy fights where he does show, he's huffing and puffing in the third round. He's kind of on autopilot. He's, fumigating. You look at Shahbazyan. For me, this guy is a historical fade. He's 7-5 in the UFC. He's a dangerous striker, right? We saw him knock out Brad Tavares when that was special. Shout out to KDO Bet, says he has special striking. Absolutely. When I look at Shahbazyan's body of work, though, guys, like, let's go through fight by fight real quick. He beats Dylan Budka. Congratulations. He loses to Gerald Mearshart. And again, we saw Gerald Mearshart go out there and lose to Petroski. It was a competitive decision. But Edmund, right, has some success early. This is the classic, right? If you had said, like, his whole career was going to be defined by this guy could have a great first round and then just find a way to lose in the second, Like that's been the story, guys. Like he's a dangerous first round fighter. You like Edmund, he's probably going to win in the first round. If he doesn't win in the first round, his chances of winning the fight just fly down exponentially. Some people have a better VO2 max than others, right? Like I'm not trying to get scientific on people, but like at the end of the day, I have to just question whether this guy has 15 minutes of gas in his body. Like honestly, you go and look 1-1 in fights that go to decision in his career. I mean, guys, that Jack Hermanson fight was anything but a finish. Like Jack did everything but finished him. You know what I mean? Like he had him down on the ground, beating him up for the second and the third round. He was looking for the stoppage. He couldn't quite get him out of there. He did everything but finish that guy. Then you look at Nasruddin Imavov, finished him in the second round, got him on the ground. Derek Brunson, finished him in the third round, got him on the ground. Anthony Hernandez, finished him in the third round, got him on the ground. Gerald Mearshart, finished him in the second round, got him on the ground. Are you guys starting to sense a pattern? He does not like to be on the ground. He does not like to fight for more than 6 minutes. So if Petroski can get him on the ground or make him fight for more than 6 minutes, he's going to win. I think Petroski is going to win this fight. I do not think that he's the most trustworthy guy you've ever seen. There is a world in which he gets sparked in the first round here. Think of the Michel Pereira fight, right? A big physical guy just kicked him in the face early, got him out of there. But is this going to be, an easy dub for Edmund? Only if he wins via KO1. I think otherwise he's in deep shit. Kiwi said, I like Petroski here. If he dies, he dies, but give me the plus 170 on the guy with all the 2-3 upside. I totally agree. And here's the other thing. If I told you that Petroski subbed Edmund in the first round, like, would I be surprised? Yes. But would I be stunned? I honestly would not be, because I do think that Petroski is a really good wrestler and grappler. Like, just all things aside, he's very good at it. Did he lose a grappling match to Pat Downey? Sure. But is the guy very high level in the wrestling and the grappling? Yes. So I just think that this guy, he's probably going to show levels in this fight. Unless Petroski gets knocked out, I think he's going to show levels in this one and win. So that's the way I see it, guys. Not an Edmund guy, never was. Shout out to Derek Brunson, Gibbs gang, trained by the best. So I've always been a little bit skeptical of Edmund, and it's no disrespect, right, guys? The one thing to consider about this guy, still just 27 years of age. So could you theoretically imagine a world in which maybe it's a mental thing and he gets over and he gets better? Like, yeah, I'll give him the benefit of the doubt. I'm not heartless, but 27 years of age, he's had a lot of fights, I think 12 in the UFC, and I feel like we just know exactly who this guy is. If he can finish you in the first, if he can get you out of there, if he's way better than you in every phase, he can win. But if you have anything to offer in rounds 2 and 3, and you're a specialist, you're going to take him out in your specialty, wherever you're at. So my guy, MMA Fu, says he fought Edmund's brother in Muay Thai. He was 17 and I was 31. Hey, how'd you do, Fu? That's a tough out. Who is that? Leon Shahbazyan? Damn, you're a gangster for that, Fu. But yeah, ultimately, you look at this fight, the size is similar. Petroski's a little bit smaller here. He's the older guy. So I understand why he's a dog in some ways, but ultimately, I think he should be a very slight underdog, like plus 100, plus 110. If anything, I think anything above that, you're playing with fire here. How can you, ABCs, they always bet on cardio, right? And that's regrettable because I had Sean O'Malley against the machine, Merab Dvalishvili, but it was about price dynamics, right? In this fight, you're paying chalk for the guy with worse cardio. I think long-term, that's a pretty bad strategy, personally. But again, it all depends on the matchup, right? So in this one, maybe he just goes out there and, 9 times out of 10, he's going to spark him in the first round. If that's how you feel, then Shahbazyan's your guy. But I think that I'd like having Petroski here, and I'd be happy to buy him again live after round 1 if he gets, beaten up, because I think there's a chance he can come out after a bad first round, and take him down. So that's ultimately how I see it. I will just say the quality of competition difference is pretty significant. We've definitely seen a good quality of competition for Edmund, broadly speaking, though he's been hit and miss against those guys. Adolfo Vieira, quality win. Dylan Budka, nothing to write home about in my view. Josh Frem, nothing to write home about in my view. The Jacob Malkoun fight is concerning, but Jacob Malkoun is also a good fighter. So I don't really hold that one against him. The way it happened, I hold against him. The guy he lost to, I don't really hold that against him. Michel Pereira, I mean, he's another guy that's won a lot of fights. He's a serious guy in the UFC. Beat Gerald Meerschaert, good win. The Wellington Terman win doesn't mean a ton to me, but he did out-grapple a black belt. And then, Maximov, it's one of the best memories I have of, this guy Petroski. He was like a plus 350 underdog in that fight. It was absolutely absurd. And he went out there and choked the guy silly in like 17 seconds. So shout out to the Diaz brothers hype job in that one, because that was absolutely insane. Nick Maximov, not a bad fighter either, right? Got some wins in the UFC, but ultimately just the pricing dynamics were insane, man. He literally put him to sleep with that anaconda choke so fast. Then Hu Yazong, Michael Gilmore. I mean, those are very low level, but to lose to Brian Battle and Aaron Jeffrey, like, yeah, those are fair losses. Loses to Brian Battle, Aaron Jeffrey, Michelle Pereira, and Jacob Malkoun over the course of a career. I don't think that's anything to hang your hat at, especially where he was at in his career at that time. Meanwhile, Gerald Meerschaert, Anthony Hernandez, Nasruddin Imavov, Jack Hermanson, Derek Brunson, they're fair losses, right? You don't want to, say, man, this guy is horrible. But, like, Gerald Meerschaert is the kind of guy that Edmund Shahbazyan, needs to be able to go out there and beat, right? He's an older guy in the division. He's a guy that, is out there having tough fights with a lot of guys and needs to grit them out and win late. And he wasn't able to do that, right? So a lot of these times they tried to set him up for success. He knocked out Tavares, Marshman, Charles Byrd. He went to a split decision with Darren Stewart back in the day, guys, and the same problem was there, right? He gassed out in that fight. So I just think that there's been red flags on Shahbazyan for a long time when fights get long. And for me, I just can't trust a guy with bad cardio at these prices. But has he fought the better guys? Yes. But is Petroski, doing well against common opponents? Yeah, he beat Gerald Meerschaert. So for me, I think that he's the undervalued guy in that matchup. Speaking of undervalued guys, I'm kidding. We've got Cody Garbrandt taking on Raoni Barcelos. And, both of these guys have dealt with the washed allegations, right? But Raoni Barcelos, I think, just defeated the washed allegations, via unanimous decision. When he went out there and beat Peyton Talbot, like Peyton Talbot, serious fighter, tough guy. I mean, destroyed Simon, just walked through him. And a guy that went out there and came back from adversity against Nicky Geary and showed like, hey, you could take me down early. I'll take your back. I'll take you out of this fight. Now you look at a guy like, Cody Garbrandt, no love Garbrandt. He's the younger man in this matchup, right? He's just 33 years of age. But he's 9-6 in the UFC, 8-4 for Raoni Barcelos. So similar records, but a little bit more losing on the Cody Garbrandt side. And here's the problem for me with a guy like Cody, guys. 4 knockout losses in the bantamweight division. That is some concerning stuff. And then you go to his career, 11-4 career to the knockout, 1 submission loss, 1 decision loss. Let's look at the results, right? The guy pulled out of the Miles Johns fight, not once, but twice, right? He got injured last November. The guy's dealt with a lot of injuries. And then you look at his wins lately. Trevin Jones, his only win in the UFC was against Mario Bautista. It's like one of the biggest fluke performances in UFC history. He also beat Timur Valiev. But then you look at, Cody Garbrandt goes out there and defeats him, right? Brian Kelleher, he defeats Brian Kelleher. Brian, unfortunately, New York guy, we root for Brian, but he's no longer with the promotion, right? You look at the Davison-Figueiredo fight. Davison, if we go back and look at his record, his last 2 times he fought championship relevant guys, he got pretty thoroughly defeated. He got beaten up by Petr Yan, and then he got kind of brutally taken out by Corey Sandhagen. It was an injury, but it looked like things were trending in the very wrong direction for him regardless. Then you look at this, guys, a string of cancellations. This one was Julio Arce. Yaya withdrew. So you can't even hold it all against him, but the level of activity has just tapered off, right? So nothing in 2024 since he got finished by Davison-Figueiredo. This is going to be his first fight in 2025. So he's been out for more than a year. And then when you look at his back class, right, he fought twice in 2023 and got wins, but they were against pretty washy guys in the division. He fought, down at 125 pounds back in 2021. So notice he did not have any fights in 2022. He had 1 fight in 2024, 2 fights in 2023. The guys just struggled to maintain this level of activity. And you look back, He lost to Fig. He won 2 fights. He lost 2 fights to Font, where he was getting hurt with every punch basically that landed in that fight. And then he fought Kai Kara France and got finished in the first round brutally. He beat Rafael Sunsao, right? Got that beautiful knockout, very aesthetic. But prior to that, he had lost 3 times in a row, all 3 via brutal knockout. So where is his chin at? Where is his confidence at? I really don't know. Davison was able to take him down and exploit him on the ground. Raoni Barcelos is extremely dangerous on the mat, 3 submission wins in his career, 8 knockout wins in his career. He doesn't like to push it as his primary go-to. However, look at the Christian Quinones result. He goes out there, he finishes him in the 3rd round. He gets the submission. Peyton Talbot, he used a lot of wrestling, grappling when he needed to, did what he had to do to get the win there. Losing to Umar Nurmagomedov, it is starting to look a little bit flukish, where he got knocked out, on basically like one big connection there. He's shown, an ability to take shots since then. Peyton Talbot landed some shots, but he was able to take them. He was able to move forward. Christian Quinones was able to do the same thing. Kyler Phillips kind of out-hustled him. That was a weird fight for me. I don't know how to evaluate that one for Barcelos, honestly, because I would have expected him to get the job done there. I think he just got out-hustled a little bit. So the Trevin Jones fight, for Raoni Barcelos, he got that win as well. So I think the better wins are on the Barcelos side, but not by a huge margin, right? Beating the same guy, Trevin Jones, beat Christian Quinones. I think that's a better win. Beat Peyton Talbot. That was a good win as well. But a guy who's not very experienced. Losing to Victor Henry, Umar Nurmagomedov, and Kyler Phillips, one thing they all have in common is speed. So I do think that, the speed of Cody Garbrandt could be a factor here. Maybe he's able to clip a guy like Raoni Barcelos on the chin. But if he's not able to do that, I think Raoni Barcelos just has more paths to victory. I think he's a little bit more consistent. So I don't have the most bullish take on this fight, but I do feel like they're favoring the guy who's 38, and I kind of do as well on instinct. So this feels like a total stay away fight for me, because I've talked about before, guys over the age of 38, more likely to get knocked out. We just talked about it in the main event. So I can't ignore that with Raoni Barcelos, right? He's over the age of 38. He has been flash knocked out before. It was a minor miracle he wasn't knocked out by Victor Henry when they fought. He was just getting absolutely styled on. So for me, I think that Cody Garbrandt, has some ability to win this fight via knockout, right? He's alive to do that. But I do think that Raoni Barcelos just has a better MMA process. So for me, close to a pick'em is probably fair in this one. Interesting fight, though. I'll be curious to see it. Can't hang. Got to go to work for the man tomorrow. Have to catch the Jourdain and Simone breakdown tomorrow morning. Absolutely. I will get timestamps up on this for you, my brother. He thinks Charles is a live dog. Simone KO of Bonfim was lucky. I think you mean, what's his name? Basharat. I think you mean Basharat, but I get where you're coming from. Both brothers, both B brothers. So totally understand that one. Later, boys. Later, Gray. Appreciate you being here, my man. And we'll definitely have those for you later on in the show. But next up, guys, we move on to another main card fight. We got a middleweight contest. I'm going to start breezing through a couple of these where we got Cody Brundage taking on Mansa Abdul-Malik. Listen, is Mansa Abdul-Malik raw? Yes. Is he capable of making mistakes that could cost him this fight? Like he could get clipped on the chin? Yes. You look back, Tresean Gore was having a lot of success against Brundage. He looked like he was getting off on his shots. He looked like he was having success. Brundage threw one big counter, got him out of there. Impressive knockout. Then you look at, I think it was, maybe Dalcha Lungiambula? Let's double check. Yeah, it was exactly Dalcha Lungiambula. Dalcha Lungiambula, right? Goes out there. He's beating up on Cody. He's getting success going. He hits him with one big counter. Dalcha goes for a shot. Guillotine choke. Cody Brundage gets the win. Is Cody Brundage above taking a DQ? No, he is not. He's willing to do that. He'll do whatever it takes to get the win. Shout out to him. Shout out to the people who bet him against Malkoon. Robbed that guy blind. Then you look at the Zach Reese fight. Zach Reese thought it was all sweet. He had the guard pull. He's looking for his stuff from guard. Then all of a sudden, pick up, slam, knockout for Cody Brundage. So we know that Cody Brundage is explosive. He's dangerous. He went out there. He knocked out Julian Marquez. He fought back from some adversity in that fight. So the guy's clearly, a dangerous fighter. He's got good offense. What's the problem for Cody Brundage? He gets finished in his losses, man. He's getting beat up. He's getting hurt. He's getting knocked out. So I think this is a violent fight. I think somebody's getting knocked out more often than not in this fight. I think somebody's getting finished way more often than not in this fight. I think this fight is one of the most likely fights just on instinct to end inside the distance on the card. Mansa Abdul-Malik, violent intentions, hits very hard, good ground and pound, pretty good motor. The problem on his tape, he has been clipped, he has been hurt, he has been rocked regionally by guys that he's way better than, way more athletic than. His wrestling is very good, but he likes to bang it out on the feet sometimes, and he does not have the best striking defense. He's got very good offense. Cody Brundage has, pretty questionable decision-making at times. His defense is not great. His offense is pretty potent. That's how he's kept his job in the UFC. And certainly that's how he's, maintained, some fan profile. He goes out there, he knocks people out, he gets finished. He's in violent, explosive fights more often than not. So I think that this is a Mansa Abdul-Malik spot where I do think he's a deserved favorite. I think he's going to win this fight. I think he's a better athlete, but I think Cody Brundage is a more experienced guy. So he's going to try and rely on that savviness. He's going to try and be opportunistic, look for a finish. And I don't think he's drawing dead to that. So for me, I'm thinking violence here. I think somebody's getting violently finished probably in the first 2 rounds. My guy Rick the Ruler says, how about that boy Merab? The machine equals GOAT. I agree with you. After last night, it's hard to argue with that, right? The criticism of Merab has always been, where are the finishes? Who's he going out there and taking out? And he finally took somebody out last night. He did it in a championship level fight. The win streak is phenomenal. His record against the UFC champions is impeccable. The guy is a world-class fighter, greatest of all time in the bantamweight division. Hard to take anything away from him. So for me, guys, to close out this fight, I think Mansa Abdul-Malik is going to get the job done. I think he's going to win this fight. Oh, we're going the wrong direction. Here we go. Alonzo Menifield, Umar Sy. This is going to be the first fight on the main card. And I think that when I look at this matchup, give me Umar Sy. Much closer to his athletic prime, 29 years of age, big experience gap here. He's fighting a ranked fighter. I believe that's not a coincidence. I think Alonzo Menifield is, trending in the wrong direction. He's a small guy physically compared to a guy like Umar Sy. Look at Umar Sy's measurables, guys. 6'4", 83-inch reach, just a massive size for this division. And when I was putting together my divisional dark horses at the beginning of the year, had to include this guy. He's from a marketable region in the world where the UFC's been trying to do more business, bringing a show to Paris every year. Umar Sy is the kind of guy that could drum up some interest. If he could go out there, start getting some finishes, start getting some big names on his ledger. And you look at Umar Sy, let's pull up his resume. He's 2-0 so far in the UFC, beat Dawoon Jung. Dawoon Jung is a former, fringe rank guy. Beat Tuko Tokos, finished him, in devastating fashion, made it look easy. So I think that when you look at this guy, Umar Sy, if he had finished Dawoon Jung, his hype train would probably be going off the rails right now. This guy had a lot of canceled bouts. He had a lot of problems. He withdrew from his last booking. So I'm going to have to find out exactly why Umar Sy pulled out of this last Alonzo Menifield booking. But we look at Alonzo on the other side, guys. He's 9-5-1 in the UFC, a bounty of experience. But he's been knocked out 3 times in the promotion, and 2 of those were in his last 3 fights. He beat Julius Walker via contentious split decision. I definitely thought Julius slowed down over the course of that one. He was making his UFC debut. So hats off to Alonzo. He stood tough. He took some big shots. He kept finding a way to come back. He was fighting for his job potentially in that fight, but he found a way to win. He has a win over Dustin Jacoby, but in that fight, he basically landed 2 really good punches and then stood there watching him the rest of the fight. So it's a good outcome, right? It worked out for him, but if he didn't land those 2 big punches and hurt Jacoby enough to get the decision, then he would have gotten outworked over the course of that one and lost the fight. You look at the Jimmy Crute fight, gets the guillotine after they went to a draw. So he had a really competitive fight with him. Then Misha Serkinov, a guy who's past it, no disrespect. Askar Mozarov, a complete fraud in all senses of the world. Guys, then you look at this loss to William Knight. I mean, just a absolutely horrendous loss for him to have on his record. And he lost it based on doing nothing. So when I look at guys like that, it's hard for me to get behind somebody who doesn't do much out there. And he's a massive underdog in this one. So for me, this is a clear dog or pass situation on the money line. But if you just ask me, who do I think wins this fight? I think Umar Sy wins the fight. I think that he's the better guy who's coming on right now. I think that he's ready to go right now. But Alonzo Menifield packs power. Atomic Alonzo, can't count that out. He could absolutely knock this guy out. It's 205 pounds. But I think Umar Sy has a better process. I think he's probably going to take this guy to the ground. So let's see how it works out. But I think Umar Sy is the side before I do my tape study. I will always come back to you guys. And if I'm wrong, I do my tape study, my research. I'll come back and correct my thoughts on the show that I do, Bets and Banter with Wiz MMA later in the week. But right now, I'm just giving you guys my gut instinct, my first feeling about these fights. All right, next up, we got Paul Craig and Rodolfo Bellato. This is a rebooked fight. We already had this one booked before. Bellato, more physical, more dangerous, probably a better athlete in a lot of ways. But on the other side, Paul Craig, dangerous jiu-jitsu, going to be throwing up triangles, going to look for his offense. So I think the right guy's favored. I don't really trust Bellato as far as he could throw him. I do think that his chin is a little bit suspect. He's been hurt in a lot of his fights. So I'm never going to be trusting Bellato. I do think he's a future fade, but it's just hard to know what you're getting with a 37-year-old Paul Craig who's been moving up and down in weight, went down to 185, had to thin himself out. Now he's back up at 205 and potentially fighting for his job in this one. So for me, a guy who's moving up to a weight class where he's going to be small in terms of physicality, right? But Bellato, it takes up a lot more space than Paul Craig. Paul Craig's a little bit more thin, a little bit more gangly. So he's got some tools, right? He's got a lot of experience. He's fought the way better competition, no doubt about any of that. But I've talked about fighting being a young man's game, and Bellato's younger. He's bigger. He hits harder than Craig. He's a little bit more assertive on offense. And I also think there's been times where Paul Craig got hit by like a Johnny Walker, kind of folded the tent a little bit. And Bellato, you could say, like, man, you were almost finished by low-level guys. You go back and look at his record. He got finished by Vitor Petrino, who's okay, but not on a great streak right now in the UFC, right? He's lost 2 in a row in vicious fashion. But Vitor Petrino is the only guy to finish him. He did it twice. He went to a draw with Jimmy Crute. Not a great performance. However, you look at, what happened out there, and Jimmy Crute was way too physical for Paul Craig. Bellato was able to be in there with him, keep the physicality, match it for the most part. You look at the Ihor Potieria fight, he got hurt badly in both those fights, right? He got hurt badly by Crute. He got hurt badly by Potieria, but his willingness and his ability to recover is what won him the fight. And, we've seen him rally from that adversity. We know Paul Craig can rally from adversity on the ground, but can he rally from adversity on the feet? I just don't know that I trust him to do that. So for that reason, I'm going to very reluctantly pick Rodolfo Bellato to get the job done. But I would not trust the guy personally. All right. Then we go to Michael Chiesa taking on Court McGee. Oh, boy. Interesting fight. Neither one of these guys is spring chicken. Both these guys 37 and older. Court McGee's 40 years of age, but he has been going out there and still putting on good performances. My guy Kerr's in the chat says it'd be great to see a Craig KO. I totally agree with you. I would love to see that. Rooting for Paul Craig, but again, just in terms of trust is different than rooting interest, right? I was rooting for Patchy Mix last week, but I was not trusting him at chalk. I'll be rooting for Paul Craig this week, but I won't be trusting him to get the win. All right. But looking ahead, we got Michael Chiesa, a guy who finally beat Tony Ferguson, I think it was last time out. Oh, no, excuse me. He beat Max Griffin last time out. It was a completely dominant performance by Chiesa in that one, so shout out to him. Absolutely went out there and ran him raggedy. Then you look at the Tony Ferguson performance. Goes out there and dominates Tony, made it look easy. But lost to Kevin Holland, which I think is fair. Kevin Holland at 170 pounds is a force to be reckoned with for the reasons that we've discussed many times on the show. If you see Kevin Holland at 185 against a guy who's a competent wrestler and grappler, scratch it. It's over. He's going to lose that one. But if he goes at 170, it's anybody's ball game. Even with the current champion, Jack Della Maddalena, Kevin Holland fought to a split decision. So no shame in that one for a guy like Chiesa. Losing to Sean Brady. I think people may forget that Sean Brady is kind of getting boxed up a little bit by Michael Chiesa late in that fight. Michael Chiesa was having his moments, swear to goodness. And Sean Brady, we've seen what he was able to do when he got a big opportunity against Leon Edwards. His pressure broke that man. He absolutely destroyed him on the ground, left no doubt. And meanwhile, you watch what happened in that fight with Michael Chiesa. Michael Chiesa had some moments, man. He was able to D up some takedowns. He was able to get back to his feet. So hats off to Chiesa. He's a very talented grappler. He's a guy that's been hit and miss, inconsistent. Look at the Luque fight where he goes out there and he takes down Luque and he's having some success. And then I believe he was a victim of his own success. He got in his own head. He wasn't able to get the finish. He fell over the top. Instantly, he gets wrapped up in a darce, and the fight is over shortly thereafter. So my typical cap for a Michael Chiesa fight is, does his opponent know the darce? And the reason that I ask that is because you go back and look, triangle armbar against Anthony Pettis, rear naked choke against Kevin Lee, darce choke against George Masvidal, darce choke against Vicente Luque, darce choke against Kevin Holland. Like, the guy, for a very good grappler, has been submitted a lot of times. So he's 12-5 career to the sub. And all 5 of those submission losses have been in the UFC. 8 of his 12 submission wins have been in the UFC. The guy has not recorded a TKO win as a professional. However, it is important to note, back on The Ultimate Fighter, he did get 2 TKO wins in a row, ironically, against Justin Lawrence and James Vick. So Michael Chiesa, it's not like it's 0% that he hurt somebody. It's just not very high percentage. Now he's fighting a 40-year-old in Court McGee. Court McGee is tough as an old leather boot. He's never been submitted, guys, in his professional career. And for me, that at least makes him interesting coming into this matchup, because if you're not going to be able to submit him, Michael Chiesa has never recorded a knockout. So that's the number one way that I'd be afraid for Court McGee to lose a fight. Then you look at the fact he's lost 10 decisions, right? He's basically 50-50 in decision fights. But he's a pretty good wrestler. Court McGee, good wrestler, even though he's a little bit older. He's still maintained. So let's go ahead and look at UFC stats. I haven't looked at UFC stats for any of these fights today, but this is one where I'm really compelled to see, who's more effective with their wrestling. And right now, guys, the numbers are kind of eye-popping. So let's look at this. We've got Court McGee on the right. We've got Michael Chiesa on the left. And they're about the same size. Court McGee's used to these longer fights. Michael Chiesa normally fights at a more frantic pace. He's had a lot of fights end inside the distance. Look at some of these things on paper, because they're really jumping out at me. Number one, who's landing strikes? Court McGee. He's a guy that's throwing strikes. He's landing strikes. He's defending strikes at a much higher percentage, but he's also getting hit more. So you have to acknowledge that. On the comeback, the takedowns have been there for Chiesa throughout his career. The takedown defense of Court McGee, 69%, so not bad, but not great. Right? It's not jumping out the page. So I do think there's a path for Michael Chiesa getting a bunch of takedowns here and winning like that. But if you're just pathing out, like, okay, how could Court win this fight? If he's able to sprawl on these takedowns, not let Chiesa get him to the ground and dominate him physically, could he go out there and win this fight with a volume-based striking decision? I think that's possible. I think that's probably a lot of Court's win equity in this fight. I joke that we've seen, our guy Michael Chiesa get submitted a bunch of times, but Court hadn't submitted anybody in so long before he fought Tim Means. I think it had been since 2009. Let me fact check myself live in real time. Damn it. I was wrong. It was 2010. But anyway, it had been since 2010. He submitted Ryan Jensen. Let's see if there was another submission win. Nope. All decisions. Tim Means, guys. Tim Means. If he's going to lose, he typically gets submitted. You go and look at his career, guys. Tim Means has been submitted 8 times out of his 17 professional losses. So most of his losses and the majority of his losses inside the distance have been via submission. So we had the beat on that, right? I think I ended up giving that out on the Lambo Plays show, as a good spot. Like, I think it was plus 800 on Court by submission, and people weren't expecting it. Some people were. Shout out to you guys that were on it with me. Cheers to you guys. We'll take a sip to that. Pour some out for our guy Tim Means, a wrestling coach, a great man, a great fighter. So hats off to Tim Means, the dirty bird. But ultimately, Court went out there and did what we expected him to do in that fight and got the submission. Now it's a much tougher task. I do think that Tim Means is a little bit more past it than Michael Chiesa, with all due respect. And also when you just look at where they were at in terms of at their peak, Michael Chiesa was a guy that's like a fringe title challenger type guy, a guy that was a top contender type guy, an Ultimate Fighter guy. Tim Means is a little bit of a step below that, in my view. So then you look at where's Court McGee at. He got that win. That was a bounce back win that he needed. He lost to Alex Morono. That was a somewhat controversial decision. But prior to that, he got knocked out by Matt Brown in the very first round. Matt Brown is in his 40s. and he got knocked out brutally by Jeremiah Wells in the first round. And I was quite certain that Jeremiah Wells was going to knock him out. That was a horrible matchup for Court. A freak athlete who's super dangerous in the first round. And, there's just a lot of problems that he was going to face in that fight. So when you look at what he's done, I mean, that win over Ramiz has aged quite nicely, right? Just the consistency of his style. Ramiz is an extremely dangerous grappling threat. We've seen that now. He was able to go out there and defend those. So this is really good matchmaking in a lot of ways. We're going to get some answers, in my view, about, if Michael Chiesa can go out there and take down a guy like Court McGee. If we look at Court McGee's fight-by-fight stats, let's see when the last time somebody took him down was. So Ramiz Brahimaj is the last guy to take him down. It's hilarious, though. Court had the only knockdown of the fight. He outlanded him on significant strikes, and he got 5 takedowns to 1 against Ramiz. 1 sub attempt to 1 sub attempt. So what a freaking legend this guy Court McGee is. Most of the time he's winning the takedown battle. He gave up 1 takedown against Claudio Silva, basically a 1-round fighter back in the day. I'm realizing now that I forgot to hit share tab on UFC stats. Hopefully this makes things more clear for you guys. But we go through and look, Sean Brady took down Court McGee twice back in the day. That's the last guy to take him down more than 1 time. So Claudio Silva took him down once. Ramiz Brahimaj took him down once. But this guy is very difficult to get multiple takedowns on, and he's never been submitted. So, man, this feels to me like a money line pass situation, a dogger pass situation. That's what I meant to say, because I do value Chiesa. Like, I think he's the better fighter. Chiesa by KO could even be a really sneaky look. Nobody's predicting him by KO, and he's fighting a guy that basically gets KO'd when he loses. Never been submitted before. Chiesa hasn't knocked anybody out since The Ultimate Fighter, but if he's getting dominant positions, is it really impossible he could get the TKO? So for me, I'll probably be a little contrarian in how I approach this fight, if anything. But yeah, I just think that when I look at Court McGee, the guy's never getting submitted. He's fought pretty good guys. He's fought guys that are dangerous. Sean Brady, we know what he can do, right? He wasn't able to submit Court. So I think that this is a fight where, would I be flabbergasted, stunned? I've never seen anything like this. Michael Chiesa submitted Court McGee. It's possible, but as good as Michael Chiesa is, and I do think he's very good at grappling, he's not impervious to getting submitted himself. And meanwhile, Court McGee's never been tapped, and he's fought good guys. So I don't think this is going to be easy, big bank takes little bank on instinct. The guys that have done that to Court McGee are extremely aggressive athletes that have knockout power. And I don't view Michael Chiesa as that guy. So I think Michael is a deserved favorite, but it's a question of degree, not kind. I think he should definitely be the favorite, but there's a lot of confidence on the Michael Chiesa side here. And I get it when he's going against Tony Ferguson, who's completely washed. And I get it when he's going against, Max Griffin, who, in my opinion, is a little bit more vulnerable, right? If we go back and look, let's see if Max Griffin had ever been submitted before. No, that was the first submission loss of his career. However, he did get TKO'd. I think it was by Colby Covington back in the day, a guy that's not known for finishing people. And it was very similar, right? It was breaking him down in the 3rd round on the ground. Michael Chiesa broke him down, eventually got him to capitulate in the end of that fight. So, hey, hats off to him. Chiesa is still a dangerous guy. 12 wins by submission is simply nothing to sneeze at. 2 by KO if you include The Ultimate Fighter. 6 by decision, 5 of those in the UFC. So Michael Chiesa is a fantastic fighter, but he's not a spring chicken. He's an old enough guy himself. I think that at his best, he was definitely better than Court McGee was at his best, but now they're both guys that are a little bit past it, and I think a little bit more variance is introduced when you got 2 guys that are a bit older. Next up, we got Malcolm Wellmaker versus Chris Moutinho. I think Malcolm Wellmaker is going to win this fight via knockout, but the only danger I would present for him is that if he comes out and tries to knock him out and throws everything into every punch, maybe Chris Moutinho, who we know has great cardio, great will to win, could eventually, break him down with his willpower and his cardio. But ultimately, I think this is a fight where we're going to find out, if Malcolm Wellmaker has generational power, because Chris Moutinho is tough and he's willing to take one. And he's willing to come forward. And we saw what O'Malley had to do in terms of, putting shots on this guy to put him down. And he's done very well outside the UFC. But with all that being said, I think Moutinho is a little too small when you're looking at the Wellmaker fight. I think that he's probably going to get hit with a lot of big shots early and get lumped up and get damaged up. And it's probably going to affect his vision and his ability to see this guy and try and make good reads. So I think this is a disaster in terms of a matchup for him, but I'm glad he's getting another shot in the UFC. I think he's a tough guy who's earned his way back. Just looking at his record, guys, here's the thing. He went 0-2 in the UFC, and I would be totally fine if he just lost to O'Malley. I do think sometimes people underrate how much one fight can play into another. So he gets beat up by O'Malley badly for a long time and then goes out there and fights, 9 months later against Guido Canetti and gets knocked out in the very first round. I think that was still bleed over from that O'Malley fight, but here's the truth, guys. That was a 42-year-old fighter in Guido Canetti. That's just not the kind of loss you want to have on your record, period, point blank. And anybody can get caught, so no skin off his nose there. But then he lost a grappling match. He lost a boxing match. He bounced back with some wins over a 14-16 guy, an 8-2 guy, a 6-3 guy, a 6-7 guy, 22-16. So not bad, but they're not guys like Malcolm Wellmaker. Malcolm Wellmaker, 9-0 as a professional. You're going to have to teach this kid how to lose if you want to beat him. 1-0 on Contender Series, got the knockout win over hyped Adam Bromhold. Knocked out Cameron Simon as well, a training partner of the current middleweight champion, Dricus du Plessis. Ultimately, Malcolm Wellmaker, for me, more serious prospect, more dangerous fighter, better guy. I think he wins it. I think he wins it via stoppage. Next up, guys, we've got Cody Durden and Jose Ochoa. And Jose Ochoa, I believe, fought Loner Kavanaugh in his UFC debut. He lost that one. Now, he's favored coming into this second fight. He did well in that fight against Lonnie Kavanaugh. He didn't fight poorly, but, Lonnie Kavanaugh is like a striker primarily. He's got some wrestling. He's got some grappling. He's not afraid to mix that in. And let's go look at the UFC stats page, and see where these guys stack up. So if we go back and look, Jose Ochoa did have a 100% takedown defense rate against Lonnie Kavanaugh. So he was not letting Kavanaugh get in on those legs. My guy Monotone says Ochoa time. Nice. I definitely think that's possible, right? He's 24 years of age. So what do we expect? We expect him to get better fight over fight. 100% takedown defense rate first time out. Competing with a guy like Lonnie Kavanaugh. All those for me are bullish signs. The thing that makes me at least cautiously, thinking about, hey, what could go wrong here? Cody Durden, 6-5-1 in the promotion. He's not a world beater, but he's a tough out. He's a guy that can get some takedowns. He's a guy that can get on top of you, wear you out a little bit. And he's the same size as Ochoa here. When you look at a guy like Joshua Van, I thought Josh Van was clearly a world championship contender going into this weekend. And he proved it once again. The way that the guy fights is so hard for people to deal with over time. He's going to throw so many strikes. He's going to get on you, from the opening bell. He's going to touch your body. He's going to touch your face, and he's not going to let you off the hook. If you try and wrestle with him, he's going to get right back up to his feet and then start working on your body. So I think that Cody Durden, just had a really tough time with him, right? You look back at Cody Durden's recent run, he loses to Josh Van. He didn't get finished. I thought that was a feather in his cap, a tough guy. Could have been stopped, but he fought through it. He found a way to get to the bell. You look at the Matt Schnell fight. That was a great win by Cody Durden. Put him away, did it with the choke. And we saw Jimmy Flick is like a career submission artist. That's the only way he wins fights throughout his career. And he was not able to get Schnell out of there, right? But Cody Durden was able to do it. He was able to touch him a little bit on the feet, make Schnell make a bad decision. When Schnell shot in, put him away. I have a video on my channel. If you guys want to go look at it, it's a shorts video about why that choke worked. It was not totally dissimilar to some of the mechanics that we saw from Merab this weekend. I just think that Matt Schnell actually tried a little bit harder to stay in the fight than Sean O'Malley, but your mileage may vary. That was my sincere opinion. I did not think O'Malley did optimal defense when Merab was starting to go for that choke. I think he was ready to go home. I think he was ready to get out of there. Again, that's no disrespect. I would not blame anybody who's getting picked up, slammed, beat up by Merab all over the octagon and who's already been in there with the guy for 5 rounds before to say, this is not my night and get me out of here, take me home. I don't blame him for that, but that is truly what I saw when I was watching live. I know I'm not the only one that saw that. Just in terms of how you typically defend when somebody puts you in a front headlock, your goal should be to either spin all the way out or to flat back yourself. And Sean kind of did a very half-hearted spin under Merab and then got caught in that north-south choke. I think that's the first north-south choke in the Reebok era. So shout out to whoever sourced that data, but since the Reebok era is what I mean. But it's just absolutely unbelievable, how that fight transpired. Now, you look at the Matt Schnell fight, guys. What Cody Durden did, that was a really good adjustment. He went to that ninja choke, and when Matt Schnell tried to roll, he rolled with him. So the one thing that people do that's very effective to get out of that ninja choke is they, rip their whole body and try and pull your elbow, your arm, your shoulder out of alignment so that way your grip is loosened, right? But when you have it super tight like this, right, and I'm talking a ninja choke, so you come under, you come to here, then you reinforce with your own chin and roll with them. Oh, my goodness, guys. It was just a brutal, devastating choke. And, again, I have a short video on that on my channel. If you're interested, you can go look at it. But at that time, Cody Durden, that's his big win. And Matt Schnell, with all due respect, is the guy who can be finished. He can be a little bit quick tappy. When he got in that guillotine from Royval, a very tight guillotine, by the way, from Brandon Royval, he did double tap with the hands, and it was a little alarming, right? Then you look back at Cody Durden's work. Loses to Bruno Silva. Gets knocked out in that fight. That's one of those fights that's a tough run out. He was having a lot of success in that fight, but here's the concern for me with a guy like Cody Durden. I always talk about a fighter who could be having a perfect night at the office, and then if one thing goes wrong, it could all go wrong. It could just come apart. He got knocked out, by Bruno Silva in a fight where he was dominating. So that for me is concerning. I don't love to see that because it means that at any point, you could just let this slip through your fingers. Bruno Silva's a big hitter. We know that. But Josh Van has been knocked out before, and he didn't get knocked out by Bruno Silva, right? He dealt with that problem accordingly. Cody Durden was having a ton of success, taking him down, landing big shots on the feet, and when he got hit with one back, the fight was over shortly thereafter. You look at the Takeru Ulanbekov fight. We see that Cody is a good wrestler, a good grappler, but he's not the best in the division. He's not world class anywhere. And that's a problem, At mixing all the skills, he's very good. But when it comes down to each individual discipline, I don't think he's a world-class wrestler. I don't think he's a world-class grappler. I don't think he's a world-class striker. So he's in a really tough spot. Now, on the other side, Jose Ochoa, he's young enough that you still got to give an open mind about this guy. He's a proven finisher, 7 wins, all of them inside the distance, 0-1 to the decision. But that decision's against, number one, a good fighter, and number two, it was a competitive decision, right? He didn't completely rinse. So the guy has shown he's tough. He's dangerous. You don't want to mess with this guy. He can go out there and do some damage and mess you up. He can submit guys. He submitted an undefeated Juscelino Pantoja on the regional scene. That guy's 7-1 as a professional, 32 years of age, so not old and washed. Bounced back, got some big wins under his belt. A Shuto guy, a Shuto champion. So fair enough. I'm not familiar with his work, but for me, that looks just on base level like a decent enough win. 4-4 opponent before that. Man, he really didn't fight many tough opponents before that, though. So for me, this is in terms of matchmaking, this is clearly the second hardest fight of Ochoa's career. Just off baseline proven skills. The wins for Cody Durden, they're frankly nothing to sneeze at in the UFC. Arichi Lang, not a bad fighter. Not a world beater, but not a bad fighter. Carlos Mota, out of the promotion, but I think he'll be back soon. JP Buys, not a good fighter in the UFC level. Charles Johnson, good fighter in the UFC level, fringe top 15 guy. Jake Hadley, he's no longer with the promotion, but he's not a bad fighter, man. He lost to Nascimento. He lost to this guy. He's not a bad fighter. So I look at Cody Durden as an interesting challenge. I'm going to watch the tape and find out exactly who Ochoa is from his footage because, truthfully, I don't remember much except his Lonnie Kavanaugh fight. But unless he's got lights out takedown defense, I think this is going to be a hard fight. I do think Cody Durden, for whatever flaws he may have in his game, he's tough, he's game, he wants to win. He's going to go out there and try and push his wrestling and grappling game plan. But I do think, a shootbox Diego Lima guy might be able to catch him with a sub. I do know that Cody can get caught on the feet. There's no doubt about that. And, we saw last time out that Ochoa can fight 15 minutes against good guys. So he could definitely win this fight. I'm not saying that he shouldn't win this fight, or he shouldn't be favored. I just don't feel that confidence in him without doing the tape. So for me, I'll hesitantly pick Ochoa to get the win here by hook or by crook. But I think Cody Durden is a live underdog, unless I watch something on the film that I really don't like. So I would say this fight, like in my gut, is like minus 120 Ochoa pre-tape. After tape, I'll tell you guys if my mind changes here. All right, guys, next up. We've got 3 fights left here, and this is the one Gray was asking about in the chat. Ricky Simón, Charles Jourdain. Interesting fight. And I got to say, Ricky made a very hilarious joke. If you guys missed it, Ricky was saying yesterday on Twitter, he's like, I'm headed to the bar with a picture of Israel Adesanya. I beat that dude one time about Pereira, because Ricky Simón beat Murad way back in the day. So I don't want to overrate Ricky Simón or underrate him. I think he's a very good fighter with a pretty basic set of skills. He's got good grappling. It's not going to blow your hair back, but it's good. And when he hurts you, especially like if he hurts you with the hands, he knows how to close the show with the grappling, whether that's getting on top of somebody, whether that's going for that head and arm choke. He knows where his bread is buttered as a fighter. Then you look at, his size. He's a small guy, 5'6" compared to 5'9" on the other side. He's given up, 3 inches of height in this matchup, but he's a primary wrestler. So I don't think that's necessarily to his detriment here. When Ricky's out there, his best skills are to wrestle with guys or to hit them with power. I would say that long extended striking exchanges are not his friend, but he's good at cracking guys with big shots. He did it to Jack Shore, hurt him, followed him to the ground, finished him on the ground. Last time out, he fucking knocked Basharat's head off. And I don't think many people were expecting that. I thought Ricky could go out there and win. I thought he was a live underdog. I did not think he was going to knock his head clean off. I just did not expect that at all. So I want to say Ricky Simón, 21-6. Let's look at his UFC record and let's go examine it piece by piece. He's 9-5 in his run in the promotion. And he arrived in 2018, right? So he's been here for a long time, gets his win over Murad Dvalishvili, Montel Jackson, Hani Yahya. I mean, guys, that's a pretty incredible 3-fight run to start off your UFC career. So shout out to that guy. What a beast. Then he goes on and fights Uriah Faber. And this is where you see the limitations of a guy like Ricky Simón. Uriah Faber at that time was considered a little bit washed, right? A little bit past it. Let's look at the age differential. 40 years of age for Uriah. So it was 40 versus 26. And, he looked so basic in that fight. He ran forward, got hit with overhands, and got finished. It was not a great look. Then he comes out against Rob Font. Disappointing fight because Rob used his size, the fact he was long, big, could box, and he just beat the shit out of him from the outside for large portions of the fight, D'd up some of the takedowns. Let's go back and look at the stats for that fight because I'm curious to know. So we've got Ricky Simón and Charles Jourdain, but let's go back and look at Ricky Simón first. We're going to look at his run in the UFC. So last time out, he was down 20-11 on the significant strike count and knocked him out. So he got 1 takedown in that fight. He landed 11 significant strikes, and one of those 11 put the guy in the ground. Then you look back, guys. He lost to Lockdog, Vinicius Oliveira. I mean, Lockdog beat his ass bad. I bet Lockdog there at like plus 2XX. That was crazy. That pricing was crazy. He lost to Mario Bautista. And I think a lot of people judged him harshly for that. Now we've seen Mario Bautista is the truth, right? He's a difficult guy for anybody in this division. I talked about before the fight, I need plus money to fade a guy like Mario Bautista. He's just that good. And I think, after the fact, people are going to see like, hey, Mario Bautista is playing for keeps, man. He's a good fighter. He could be finished. He could be hurt. That's the danger with Mario. He's been hurt by Trevin Jones, who he's way better than. But in this recent run, this iteration, the guy's been lights out. So he beats, Ricky. Then you look at the Song Yadong fight. Song knocked him down twice, finished him. That was a really tough fight for Ricky, right? And that's the one where, you start evaluating, man, is this even for me? Then you go back and look. Rob Font, 90-59 on significant strikes. Even though there were 6 takedowns for Ricky, he doesn't always do enough with the striking volume, right? So we go back and look. Let's look at his career from beginning to end. He gets on the Contender Series, beats this guy, 14 takedowns from Ricky Simón. That's when people knew, man, this guy's got good volume takedown approach. He's not afraid to keep shooting takedowns. But the control wasn't there. right? If you need 14 takedowns, it means you're lacking control. Then you look at the Merab fight. He was outlanded on significant strikes. He got knocked down in that fight. He got out-wrestled in that fight, but he gets the win on his record. Hats off to him. Then you look at the unanimous decision win against Montel Jackson. He did it on the strength of his wrestling and his control time in that fight. Got outlanded 42-25 on significant strikes. Ricky goes out there and knocks down Hani Yahya twice is what I mean to say. He knocked out Rafael Assunção. I'm thinking of a different Brazilian gentleman. But in any case, you look back at that fight, 4 takedowns against Hani Yahya without getting submitted. So he did a great job there. Did exactly what he needed to do against the unanimous decision win. But he loses to Uriah, gets knocked down on the first 11 significant strikes there, only landed 4, gets outlanded 90-59 by Rob Font, beats a former flyweight, a blown-up flyweight in Ray Borg, but he got touched up in the boxing, split decision in that fight, despite outlanding him by 20 significant strikes, despite having a 7 takedown advantage. Was it crazy based on those stats to see a split decision? Yeah, but do I get it based on the optics? Yeah, he was getting touched up by Ray Borg in that fight. Then you look at the Gaetano Perello fight. That guy's not really UFC level at all, in my view. Brian Kelleher, a guy who's no longer with the promotion. Rafael Assunção, a guy who's past his best. Jack Shore, that was a good win, but that guy's retired. Song Yadong, real relevant contender. He did not win. Mario Bautista, real relevant contender. He did not win. Vinicius Oliveira, real bantamweight contender. He did not win. So I believe that Ricky Simón is a true gatekeeper at this point. You know, when you look at where he's at in his career, he is 32 years of age, so he's not past it by any means, but he's already put together 14 fights in the UFC, you know, and in his recent run, you know, if we take out the grappling results, he's 1-3 in his last 4 fights. So it would take so much rebuilding for Ricky to get back where he wants to be, and he's already up there in age, so it's not going to be easy, right? On the other side, you know, he's taking on a Charles Jourdain, who's on the right side of 30. What do I mean by the right side of 30? I mean, he hasn't turned 30 yet. And it's not to say there's a moral superiority to being young, certainly, right? But we have to just talk about, for fighting, being the younger guy, it's often an advantage. 7-1 in the UFC. So a little bit less success for Charles Jourdain. But let's think about this. He starts off in the UFC. Guys, 155 pounds against Des Green. My man was set up for failure, okay? He comes in there. He's cutting no weight. He comes in 153.6 pounds against Des Green. He probably just showed up that morning, right? Fights Des Green. Shit does not go well for him. Then he moves on. He fights the Korean Superboy, Do-Ho Choi, a guy who had way more experience than him. He's a huge underdog. Knocks him out in 2019. Loses a close split decision as an underdog against Andre Fili. Way more experienced guy. They threw him into the deep end. Then he goes out there and he has a draw with Josh Kulabau because Josh Kulabau hurt him in that fight. The better work was done by Jourdain. I bet Kulabau is a big underdog. I was happy to get a draw. I thought I could have won that fight, but ultimately, you know, he was a big favorite. He got clipped on the chin by a guy at 145. Then you go look at the Marcel Rojo fight. Finishes that guy at featherweight. He was a huge favorite. Against Julian Erosa, he gets submitted in the 3rd round. Julian Erosa is a dangerous guy. This was back in 2021. He was in the prime of his, resurgence in many ways. You know, he's a guy that was putting it all together. He's big, long, dangerous, can grapple, can strike. He's good everywhere. Then you look at Andre Ewell, beats him like he's supposed to. Goes out there against Lando Venata. Beats him in the 1st round, takes his pants off. That was a crazy submission win. Then you look at Shane Burgos. Guys, this was a robbery, right? Shane Burgos is a local guy. He's a New York guy. He's a friend of Section 9. He's a Section 9 original. We claim this guy. We're proud of this guy. There's nothing but positive things I have to say about Shane Burgos. Frankly, I think everybody wants to see him get the last run of his career in the UFC. Let him go out a UFC fighter like he deserves to. Dana basically said last time they messed up something in the offices. They forgot to re-sign him. He kind of took it personal, went to PFL, but he had nothing but positive things to say about the UFC on the way out. Did everything right. And I believe he should be able to come back, get a couple fights, 2, 3 fights, 4 fights, whatever it is, and go out there and remind people exactly who he was inside the octagon for all those years. Shout out to Shane Burgos. But guys, the truth is Shane Burgos did not win that fight. If that fight did not take place in New York, we're probably losing that fight, you know? So that's just the way it was, right? It was a close fight, but that majority decision was a majority in New Yorkers siding with Shane Burgos over Charles Jourdain. You know, Charles did more damage, in my opinion, in that fight. Then you go back and look at Nathaniel Wood. Nathaniel Wood's a former bantamweight, right? But that was a fight where you just saw the wrestling, the grappling, everything get audited from Charles in that one. So Charles decided, you know what? I'm going down. He fought Kron Gracie, got the win there, no problem, right? Fight Ricardo Ramos, got the win there, no problem. But then he loses to Sean Woodson, right? Sean's a big guy, big for the division. Split decision, could have went either way, but he's a big guy for the division. Then he fights Gene Silva, and Gene Silva, right? Let's go look. First guy ever to knock out Charles Jourdain. And that was an impressive win for Gene Silva at the time, Gene Silva was an underdog going into that fight. And Charles decides, hey, I'm going to go down. Guys, he looked sensational against Victor Henry. He was touching him up on the feet. He submitted a guy who's a very dangerous grappler on the mat. Let's go look at Victor Henry, guys. One submission loss in his career. It was against this guy, Charles Jourdain. Pedro Falcao, who's a very high-level grappler, decisioned by Victor Henry. Charles Jourdain choked him out. Man, I do think that Charles Jourdain could be a fixture in this bantamweight division. He fought as high as 155. He fought 145. He fought very, very tough guys. Sometimes, guys, when you find the right division, it could change everything. Look at a guy like Jared Cannonier, who was fighting at light heavyweight and not having a ton of success. Fighting at heavyweight, completely, unnatural for his body type, really. Then he fights at 185. Unbelievable difference. The guy's a championship level threat at 185 pounds. So I think that for a guy like Charles Jourdain, he's young, he's extremely experienced in the UFC, and now he's probably in the right weight class after being in the wrong weight class for a long time. I do believe that the things that could come back to haunt him in this fight, we're going to take a quick glance, over at UFCstats.com as soon as it loads over here. UFC Stats has abandoned me. I'm stuck on the Ricky Simone page. It won't bring up the fighter comparison. But in any case, I do believe that Jourdain has good takedown defense. I'm looking to see specifically what his takedown defense is. 47% takedown defense over the course of his career for Jourdain. So that is not good. He gave up 4 takedowns even against Victor Henry in his first fight in this bantamweight division. But we know that he's got a nasty front headlock game. And he gave up 3 minutes, 49 seconds of control time in that fight, but did maintain a distance in significant strikes and total strikes. He outlanded him at distance, and he limited Victor Henry's striking on the ground. Victor Henry only landed 1 ground strike over the course of that fight. He got outlanded in the clinch. He got outlanded at distance. He got outlanded to each target on the body. So a lot of things were done right by Charles Jourdain in that first bantamweight contest, but he did give up some takedowns. I do think, though, Victor Henry was kind of forcing those takedowns because he was not liking how things were turning out for him on the feet. And again, a guy who's very savvy in the grappling, a guy who loves to grapple, was not able to grapple with Charles Jourdain. He put his head in the hole. He got finished. And Jourdain's done that to a couple guys now. If we look at the course of his career, he's 6-1 career to the submission. So he's been hard to put away on the mat, and he's been able to submit guys throughout his career. If we pull this up, he has been a dangerous knockout threat throughout his career. For me, this feels somewhat binary in the sense that, last time out, Ricky got a big knockout. It's not like he can't knock people out. He has knockout power in his hands. That's certainly true. But Charles Jourdain is not a guy that gets knocked out very frequently. He's been hurt a few times, so he could get clipped. He's cutting weight. He could get clipped. But 7-2 career to the knockout is Ricky Simone. He's actually been knocked out more than Jourdain. He's been submitted once, not in the UFC. So that's a feather in his cap, certainly. But when you're going to shoot, 14 takedowns or something like that, it takes tremendous, discipline, technique to not put your head in the hole at any point. If you're shooting takedowns constantly against a really good front headlock guy, they're probably going to eventually make you pay. We saw it with Merab, right? Merab went for that front headlock series a few times on O'Malley before he was able to get it. If you have a really good front headlock series and you're confident in it, you can eventually make somebody pay. And I do think that this is the kind of fight where Ricky's got to be extremely disciplined. He's got to be extremely careful. You do not want to give up a bad situation against this guy. Now, he has only given up 1 submission. It was a rear naked choke back in 2016 against Anderson Dos Santos. So it's not to say, I expect him to get submitted here or anything like that. But it is to say, do you have to worry about it against a guy this talented? I think you do. And also, I think that if this fight just plays out on the feet, I favor Jourdain to get the job done. So for me, it's a dog or pass situation. But I will do my tape study and my due diligence. Make sure that I'm not, getting out over my skis here. But Charles Jourdain, I think, is one of the better fighters from Canada right now, and he's young and he's kind of marketable. He's got the pirate gimmick, all those things. So Ricky Simone, meat and potatoes guy, he's going to go out and test where you're at and who you are, but lost 3 of his last 4. He's not calling the shots right now. He got that big win, big knockout, got back on track. Now let's see if it was a flash in the pan or if he's really back and ready to, move forward in his career. Ultimately, I think Charles Jourdain has put in the same kind of, effort, the same tough fights, gone out there and proven his mettle at a couple different weight classes, but now he's ready to go, be in his optimal weight class. He's in, the prime of his life and career, 29 years of age. So I think Jourdain is probably the click here, but I'll do my deeper study, my due diligence. He does have 8 losses as a pro. You can't, turn your nose up at that. He clearly can lose fights, but I just like this weight class so much better for him. Big, long, dangerous, skills in all positions. I like Charles Jourdain on gut instinct, but I think it could be a pick'em. I don't think he should be, minus 150 favorite or I do think there's some inherent liabilities with Charles. He gave up takedowns, frankly, way too easy against Nathaniel Wood. So I think at 135, it's going to be a better situation, but those fights do loom large in my mind as well. So fascinating matchmaking here. All right, guys, we got 2 left. Phil Rowe taking on Loosa. This is a tricky fight because, I'm not a big Loosa guy, but you look back at the guys he's fought, 2-2 with 1 no contest in the UFC. He fought Rhys McGee, and Rhys McGee just finally got a win in the UFC, knocked out Daniel Frunza. It was so poetic. It was so awesome. Shout out to an Irishman who kept believing, found a way to get it done. Shout out to Rhys McGee. But then you go back and look, losing to Gabriel Bonfim, fair enough. There's no shame in that, right? Bonfim's a dangerous guy, tough guy, difficult fighter to deal with. You look at Brian Battle. I have a t-shirt. I should have worn it today. Brian Battle says, pussy, bitch, mother, all these insults, right? And it was because him and Loosa had that confrontation after Loosa, said he was done with that fight, had the no contest, and then he wanted to talk shit right after and try and fight with him. So it was a whole big ordeal. But ultimately, Brian Battle, I believe, won that fight via TKO too. And that's where I'm going to leave that. But when you look at the fight itself, Loosa didn't do so horrible. He mostly didn't do enough, but Brian, had to take his time, pick apart, start to turn it up on him. And by that second round, I just thought he was distancing himself. When you look back at the Rhys McGee fight, you see that Loosa almost knocked out Rhys McGee. Rhys has a good chin. He's a tough bastard, man. He's hard to put away. He's a fucking gamer. He wants to be out there. He wants to win. He's not afraid to get hit. He said that himself, and when you look at that fight, oh boy, he was getting hit, and Loosa almost put him away, man. He spent a lot of gas trying, and then in round 3, he got hit so hard. He was on skates, he was time traveling, as I like to call it. It was one of the most glaring examples. My man was looking off in the distance, like fighting shadows, guys that weren't there, trying to find where his opponent was, had no idea. So Loosa absolutely time traveled in that fight against Rhys McGee and could have got put away late, but he did enough in those first 2 rounds to win it. My guy says, what is your goat milk percentage, homie? I don't have a percentage for you, my man. AJ Fletcher on the other side. Oh, very nice. Very nice. We got some spammers. Appreciate the questions, fellas, but because it's a mass attack, I'm definitely going to ban you guys, but I appreciate it. Now, AJ Fletcher, I actually bet on Loosa that night as an underdog, and that was a great cash, right? It was a dangerous fight. AJ Fletcher, hit him hard a couple times, but ultimately we saw the difference in size, the difference in back class, and AJ Fletcher no longer with the promotion. And meanwhile, we've got, a guy in Loosa who is still hanging around, right? He's done all right, found a way to win some fights, lost a couple fights, all good. So I look at Loosa as a physical guy, an athlete. He is a guy that has, an ability to mix phases of the fight. He can wrestle. He could fight in the clinch. He could strike a little bit at distance. I worry a little bit about his chin. I do think he can be cracked. I think he can be hit. I think he can be hurt. He has to rely on the fact he's got great conditioning to stay, with it in some of these fights when he's getting hit and hurt. He does seem like a guy who puts in the right work in the training room. He seems like a guy who trains with good fighters. Yeah, it's an interesting fight. Losing to Munir Lazzez, it was not a great look. Beating John Howard, UFC level fighter, losing on Contender Series to a guy like JDM, that fight he even showed a lot of fight in. He had a good submission attempt against JDM. But I learned a lot about JDM in that fight as well, that the guy is not going to give it up easy, So, man, I think of Ange Loosa as, a good physical athlete, a better athlete, in my opinion, than Phil Rowe. Phil Rowe's 34 years of age. He's a big guy. He's going to be way longer. I'm looking at, 80.5-inch reach. That's extremely long reach. If Phil Rowe used it better, I'd feel more confident. But sometimes he's pressing into guys. He's kind of crowding his work. He's getting in the clinch when he maybe doesn't need to. He likes to grapple, so he's not afraid of those engagements. But when you're a really long guy in a fighting sport, you'd want to see somebody keep somebody at the end of their jab, throw multiple long strikes out there that can hurt people, intercept them as they're coming in. And we don't always see that from Phil Rowe. He's 34, going on 35, so he's the older guy in this contest, but he is much bigger. He's had a lot of grappling experience. He's grappling with good guys. He's 3-3 in the UFC. Let's look at his fights, though. And I'm going to take away some of these grappling matches and custom rules and stuff like that, and we'll just dial down to his UFC performances. He goes out there and he loses a unanimous decision to Gabe Green, and Gabe Green just bounced back, right? Everybody had written off Gabe Green. Then he comes back out as a lightweight, and he had some success. I was so proud of Gabe Green. Went out there, dealt with adversity, came back, rallied back, and finished a guy who I did have questions about, who I was a little bit, suspect about whether or not he was for real. And that was so impressive by Gabe Green. Dealt with the adversity, then put the guy away very quickly in short order, and showed that he was a tough guy that still wanted to be here. People were mocking his faith. People were doing a lot of crazy things, and I was so happy for him. But if you look at that fight, Gabe Green had mixed results at 170 pounds. I think that's fair. And at 155 pounds, he looked like a much more normal, reasonably sized fighter. He didn't look like a huge lightweight. He just looked like, hey, this guy is right for this weight class. So at 170, Gabe was undersized, and he was able to go out there and beat a guy like Phil Rowe. So that's something we want to take in the back of our mind. Like, hey, Phil can lose to guys that are maybe not optimal, right? Optimally sized for the weight class. He beats Orion Kosi, and he missed weight for that contest. This was back in 2021. The Kosi brothers, at the time had a little bit more hype. I think they've kind of been found out. No disrespect to those guys, but just like they weren't as good as they were advertised at first. Like people were thinking, oh, these guys are good. They're tough. Look at these brothers. They're all right. They're just mid-level pros. Then you look at Jason Witt, a guy who really struggled at the UFC level, a guy whose durability could really be called into question, especially at the UFC level. He struggled, right? So Phil goes out there and he gets the win over Orion Kosi. He missed weight for that fight. He gets the win over Jason Witt. He gets the win over Nico Price via third-round stoppage. In that fight, he also missed weight, guys. So twice in the UFC, when Phil Rowe got a win, an impressive win, a stoppage, he missed weight for that contest. He goes out there, he loses to Neil Magny. When you lose a split to Neil Magny as an underdog, it's not a bad look, right? He was plus 145. It was close. It could have went either way. He did his job, so to speak. But again, he didn't show that danger factor. He didn't show I could put away a guy like Neil Magny. Neil Magny has been put away in a couple of his recent fights. That's the difference between contenders and guys in the division. Phil Rowe's a guy in the division. Contenders are finishing Neil Magny and moving past him. Michael Morales, example that comes to mind. You look at Jake Matthews. Jake Matthews, he's a solid guy. He's not a bad fighter at all. You look at his UFC record, he's 14-7, but he wins 2, loses 1. That's what that ratio is, right? Beat Francisco Prado, a guy who's up from 155, a small guy, a guy who's not as proven in the grappling at all. A guy in Phil Rowe, a middling guy in the UFC. He's a 500 fighter. But then Jake Matthews is losing to Michael Morales. He even lost to Matthew Semmelsberger, a guy who's no longer with the promotion. So, his win over Darius Flowers, what do you want to take from that? I have my questions still about Jake Matthews. I'm still not sold on whether Jake Matthews is a contender or, again, just a guy in the UFC. You could be a guy in the UFC and be a great fighter, hold down a career, do your thing. Jake Matthews has already had a lot of career longevity. He's been in the UFC for a long time. He fought at lightweight. He fought at welterweight. But that's kind of my point. Jake Matthews, a former lightweight. Gabe Green was welterweight at the time. He became a future lightweight. And by the way, he was a past lightweight as well. He'd been a lightweight, went to welterweight for a while, back to lightweight. There he is. So you see, some of these undersized guys have had success against Phil Rowe. Like, it's not like you just need to be a big guy to compete with Phil. Let's go look at the size difference with him and Jake. So Jake was giving up 4 inches of height. He was giving up 7 inches of reach, and he went out there and beat Phil Rowe. So Loosa, who's giving up, 4 or 5 inches of height, giving up 6 inches of reach. Like, yeah, we know that. Wow, first time in a long time, I hit the back button on my browser, guys. So I just kicked myself out of the stream for a second. Shout out to me and my knowledge of technology. But quickly, we'll get Tapology back up here and finish this out. Thank you all so much for the support. Appreciate everybody who's still rocking with us live. If you guys have enjoyed the stream, go ahead and drop a like on the video. Get subscribed to the channel if you are new here. But ultimately, guys, we got, to close out on this fight, a guy in Phil Rowe who's fine, but if I'm just going to look over at the odds right now, I'm seeing, I'm seeing Phil Rowe is sitting at a plus 120 underdog after opening the favorite. And Loosa went from plus 115 to minus 140. I think that was correct. That line move. I think that Loosa probably should be a small favorite in this fight, but I don't really trust either of these guys, substantially. We've got 10-5 for Phil Rowe, 10-4 for Loosa. If you look at Phil Rowe, he has been knocked out just one time in his career, but he's been hurt many times. He's got 4 losses via decision. 3 of those were in the UFC, so not a very good record in decisions. Meanwhile, Loosa is 4-4 career to the decision, so Phil Rowe is 0-4 career to the decision. Loosa 4-4 career to the decision, 2-2 to the decision in UFC. So ultimately, those are bullish signs for me. I think he's live to win the fight by knockout. I would be a little bit surprised if he got submitted by Phil Rowe. Honestly, I don't think it's like a 0% outcome, but I would be a little bit surprised unless he got hurt first, which I think is possible. But then, if the fight goes to the decision, I would actually favor Loosa. So for those reasons, I think Loosa is a deserved favorite, but, I'm not super bullish on either side of this fight. I think both guys have pretty clear vulnerabilities and either one of them could get hurt. So if the violence prices are right, maybe I'd look that way. Let's look at there's really no prop market open on this fight yet. The over-under, though, does sit at over juice to minus 240, under sitting at plus 181. If I could find a 2-1 on an under or something like that, maybe I would consider it. All right. And last but not least, guys, we've got Vanessa Demopoulos taking on Jamie Lynn Horth. 2 older women in this fight for the division. You've got 2 women that are past 35, but, Vanessa Demopoulos is a longer tenured UFC fighter. So if we look at Vanessa Demopoulos, she's 5-4 in the UFC. So a winning record over a decent sample size. You look at the women she's lost to. Talita Alankar is a jiu-jitsu champion, very, very solid grappler. She lost to Jacqueline Amorim. Amorim is a very, very quality grappler. So those are the kind of losses I expect for Vanessa when she fights good wrestlers, good grapplers. It could be a problem for her. But the win over Kanako Murata, she basically just got her with activity. It was a very close fight. It could have went either way. You never fade a stripper in Las Vegas. Do you fade a stripper in Atlanta, Georgia? I got to ask my guy, Dan Levy. I do think it's an open question. I think the strip club scene is popping in Atlanta as well. So got to be fearful of that. But you look at the Emily Ducote fight, another fight where you see a willingness to walk through fire and to attempt offense on the feet. That's Vanessa Demopoulos in a nutshell. Is she the best fighter you've ever seen? No. But does she have a decent jiu-jitsu game? Yes. Does she have decent defensive instincts on the ground? Yes. And does she try really hard for the full 15 minutes? More often than not, that's what you can expect from Vanessa Demopoulos. She's going to give you effort. She's going to give you passion. She's going to try and get violent. She's small. She's very small for the division. Here's the thing. This fight is going to be, oh my goodness. Is this fight at flyweight? Yeah, this fight's at flyweight. This is probably going to be an absolute disaster for Vanessa, guys. Vanessa is a small strawweight. I do not think she's big for the strawweight division. She's now stepping up to fight a big woman for the 125-pound division on short notice. I think that's a disaster for her, personally. So if you look at Jamie Lynn Horth on the other side, 5'7" compared to 5'2", 66-inch reach compared to 59.5-inch reach. Her last weigh-in was 126 pounds. Last weigh-in for Vanessa, 116 pounds. So again, 10-pound gap in where they last weighed in. No surprise there, in my view. Massive size differential between these two women. And Jamie Lynn Horth is a pretty dangerous woman. She's got 3 wins by knockout, 2 by submission. In the UFC, she has not proven that she can finish fights yet. She did not finish Haley Cowan. She did not finish Ivana Petrovic. But split decision with Veronica Hardy, that's not a horrible result. Losing to Miranda Maverick, a big physical flyweight, not a horrible result. For me, the question mark that I have is does she make a really boneheaded decision on the ground, or does she let Vanessa off the hook and just land free volume? I personally don't see that. I think Jamie's body kicks are going to bother Vanessa. I think that if she's wise, she will avoid, giving up easy takedowns or something like that, and keep it on the fight, keep it on the feet, keep it at distance, use her size, use her jab, use her long kick range. I think all of those factors will be in the favor of Horth, and I just think she's way too physical. So unless Demopoulos is able to pull one out of her ass, rabbit out of a hat type of deal, I don't really see her getting the win in this fight at a high clip. So I think she's better suited for strawweight. I think at 125, it's not going to go well for her, personally. All right, guys. That is all that we have for you in terms of our breakdown for the UFC Atlanta card. So that's the first look at UFC Atlanta. I'll really quickly just talk about some of what we saw at UFC 316, and we'll do some matchmaking, for these fighters moving forward. So let's pull up the card and talk results from last night. And one thing to talk about right away, we'll pull up the Tapology for UFC 316, so we have a source of reference. North-South choke is what it goes down as. Merab Dvalishvili gets the job done against Sugar Sean O'Malley in the rematch. I thought O'Malley looked healthier. I thought that he looked like he was defending takedowns better. I thought he was doing some things well. I thought the things that were not good at all were the decisions in extended grappling situations. He was sitting up to shitty single legs, not wrestling from elbow control, not doing things that I would, really expect from a guy of his level. But ultimately, pressure can make people make bad decisions. And Merab applies pressure like just about nobody else in the business. He's 34 years of age. So at this weight class, at this age, I don't think he can do this forever. But right now, the guy showed no signs of slowing down. He did a great job in this fight. Sean O'Malley looked better than the first fight, in my view, but it's masked by the fact that Merab Dvalishvili got way better and fought him better in this fight than he did the first time and beat his ass more thoroughly, more convincingly. He did better on the feet in this fight than he did in the last fight. He did better with his submission attempts. Last time out, he was guard pulling guillotines. He was doing foolish shit. This time, he was focused on staying in top position and looking for an opportunity. In my humble opinion, O'Malley realized, hey, I don't have it tonight. This guy's better than me. He's 2 steps ahead. He's starting to wear me down again. I'm starting to get fatigued. And instead of, maybe risking getting, clipped on the feet or breaking down in terms of cardio over the course of the fight, I think he just made a bad grappling decision, however you want to slice that, whether it was purposeful or, it was under the heat of the moment or whatever it was. He tried to roll from first of all, he didn't try to fight hands, right? He didn't try to fight hands here. He tried to just roll away from something and rolled underneath Merab. And again, a choke that we haven't seen in a very long time in the UFC. So take that for whatever it's worth. It's just one man's opinion. Only Sean knows the truth of that one. But it did not seem to me like he was offering 100% resistance. It seemed to me like he was maybe resigned to his reality, which was that he was not going to beat Merab on the night. So for me, square bet on the Sean O'Malley side. I bet it plus 270. It closed like plus 225 or something. it didn't matter, right? I had a good number on a bad bet. And at the end of the day, we're trying to make, good bets, which means getting good numbers on good bets. And it was a bad bet at the end of the day. ABCs, they always bet on cardio. Merab's cardio is unshakable. So when we were getting those plus 2XX prices on Merab, that was a great time to invest. But ultimately, just because somebody goes from being a, dog in a lot of their fights to being a favorite, you still got to take it matchup by matchup. And the first time these two guys were going to fight, I thought Merab was going to get the job done. I got blinded by the lights of the big numbers and also the fact that I thought there was a chance Sean could fight better. Sean did fight better, and it still wasn't enough. So for me, hats off to the machine, Merab Dvalishvili. The guy, for me, is the bantamweight GOAT. When you talk about bantamweight GOAT, why do I say that? Let's just look at this, guys. We'll take out the grappling. We'll take out the sambo. Sean O'Malley is a UFC champion, and he has not only defeated him twice, he finished him once. So he's defeated him twice. He's absolutely proven he's the better fighter, and he finished him. So one of the other champions of his era, he's proven I'm head and shoulders above. Okay, Umar Nurmagomedov, the next big thing, favored to beat him on the night. He beats him, sets him down. Now, do you guys think that Umar's a future champion? I personally think he's still got a good shot at being a future champion. So if he becomes a champion, it's another feather in the cap of Merab, who he was able to turn away and deny from their title aspirations. Then you look back, okay, now we've covered Sean O'Malley, parts 1 and 2, and the Umar fight. Let's go before that. Henry Cejudo. Henry Cejudo is a bantamweight champion, a flyweight champion, and an Olympic gold medalist. He got out-wrestled by Merab. He got beaten up in the second and third round. Merab Dvalishvili, no question, unanimous decision, 29-28, and he broke him physically and mentally. If that was a 5-round fight, he was finishing Henry Cejudo, in my humble opinion. 5 rounds against Petr Yan, former UFC champion, bantamweight champion, dangerous guy. He got absolutely beaten up for 5 rounds. It was an expose by Merab Dvalishvili. He walked him around the Palms Casino and beat him head, neck, and shoulders every which way but loose. That was the truth. Then you look at Jose Aldo, former champion, guy who fought for the belt at 135 pounds. He was a champion and one of the all-time greats at 145 pounds. Couldn't get off the fence. Couldn't move. Couldn't do anything. Merab held him in place, went for takedown, and forced Aldo in a defensive, reactive posture for most of the fight. Then you look at the Marlon Moraes fight. Closest he ever came to losing a fight in this recent run. He got hurt, he got battered, and what did he do? Found a way to bite down on the mouthpiece, get his composure back, and beat that guy, break him down, and make him, honestly, never the same fighter again. Whether it was Henry Cejudo or Merab that did the final number on it, Marlon Moraes was never the same fighter again, ever in his career. So you look at what he accomplished. He was a dangerous guy. He was a very talented fighter. This guy was a multiple-time champion in World Series of Fighting. And now everybody wants to rag on other organizations. That's fine. But you just look like the body of work. Cody Stamen's a solid guy. John Dodson fought for titles in, the flyweight class. Gustavo Lopez is fine. Casey Kenny's fine. Brad Katona, 2-time Ultimate Fighter winner, like 500-ish record in the UFC, got the win over him. Terrion Ware got the win over him. So we just look back. He beat Raytheon Stotts, a guy who went on to have a lot of success. He beat Tony Gravely back in the day. Tony Gravely went on to have a 500 career in the UFC. So what is Merab Dvalishvili? He's a great fighter, and he's a guy that I just think with this recent run, O'Malley twice, Umar, Henry, Yan, Aldo, Moraes, how do you deny him the bantamweight GOAT status now? You got Aljamain Sterling, top contender. Dominic Cruz, top contender. Just don't know that they have streaks quite the same. Streaks of dominance quite the same. Sustained dominance of a division, so talented. Just hasn't been done. And Merab Dvalishvili, until proven otherwise, he's the best in the world. Hats off to that guy. Really special fighter. Next up, guys, this one was fairly elementary. I think most people expected this. I said Kayla Harrison in the first 3 rounds. It was Kayla Harrison in the first 3 rounds. Dominant, easy. There's really not much to say except that the Nunes fight is going to be compelling. I'm happy for Kayla Harrison. I think she's a deserved champion. I think she earned her way to the belt. I think she has done everything right throughout the course of her career, by and large. And I'm really proud of her effort. And, she seems like a great person. So hats off to Kayla Harrison and wish her nothing but the best. I wish her the best in the Amanda Nunes fight as well. I think that she's a very talented woman. On the other side, Juliana Pena, she did her job as a B-side in this fight. Went out there, sold the fight, talked enough smack. But at the end of the day, skills pay the bills. I think that she's a good fighter. I don't think she's a very good fighter. I think she's, one of the worst. If you're rank ordering like the best UFC champions, I think she's towards the bottom of that list. But she's got heart, she's got toughness, she's got grit, and that's sometimes what it takes to win UFC titles more than anything else. And Juliana Pena capitalized on her opportunities throughout her career, but at the end of the day, she's gotten lucky, in my humble opinion, a handful of times, Raquel Pennington fight included. I did not think she won that fight, so ultimately, justice was served, and it was served cold by Kayla Harrison. So the better fighter won and left no doubt. Kayla Harrison by a mile. She's the best in the world, unless Amanda Nunes wants to come back and challenge that. Next up, guys, I literally have 30 seconds or less on this fight. Joe Pyfer's a powerful guy. He's got danger in his strikes, but I was not super impressed by either the game plan or the execution. I thought that his coaches tried to give him the right correctives. I did not see him implementing those. Kelvin Gastelum, for me, is a middling talent in the UFC. He's a guy that, at his best, was a potential championship level welterweight. And what we've seen instead is a guy that, overperformed for a time at middleweight, has had really sketchy results recently. I thought he was going to beat Pyfer if this fight was at altitude. And I completely feel vindicated in that thought after seeing what we saw. I thought the third round was the worst round for Pyfer. I imagine that altitude would not have served him kindly. But where does Pyfer go from here? I think that, maybe the winner of the Paulo Costa fight, with Kopylov coming up, or maybe even the loser of that fight would be fine. That would be a cool matchup for Joe. And let's find out. Let's put him in there with another guy who could bang it out on the feet and knock him out, because he likes to go out there and throw them heavies. So if that's what you want, let's get him another guy that can throw them heavies and match him back. And he's his own size. Let's not get him another small guy like Kelvin, who's way undersized, former welterweight. Let's get him a big guy who's going to swing back with him. And meanwhile, where does Kelvin go from here? I think maybe the winner or loser of the Marc-Andre Barriault and Sharon Magomedov fight. I think that would be fine for Kelvin. He's not going to be fighting for belts. He's not going to be fighting in major championship contender type fights anymore. So let's get him into some action fights, some fun fights, and see where he's at. We could use him to test prospects, I would say, moving forward if he's able to get a win. But, he's got to earn that keep a little bit and go out there with one of these other guys who's, just steady Eddies in the division, not world beaters, but guys that are going to go out there and give you a lot of effort and go fight like an MAB. And, on the other side of that equation, Sharon Magomedov is not going to be fighting for titles, in my view, anytime soon, based on that MVP fight and based on the lack of ground skills. So, you think to yourself, hey, maybe a Kelvin fight would at least tell us, like, hey, could Kelvin go out there and use this wrestling and grappling against a guy like this? Or is it really like Kelvin doesn't have, anything to offer anymore? I think that's what we ultimately need to find out. Kelvin does not look like a high-level professional athlete at 185 pounds. That's no disrespect to the man. I'm just calling it the way I see it based on body composition. He's probably a tweener, 175 pounds, 177 pounds. Kelvin Gastelum's probably feeling way better. But at 170, it's a tough cut for him based on the lifestyle and everything else. And, I think at 185, he's just doing himself no favors. It reminds me of like a different build Kevin Holland, right? For different reasons, right? They struggle in different ways, but at the end of the day, Kevin Holland can go compete with a lot of guys at 170, and at 185, it's not the same. And I think for Kelvin, against top level guys like Sean Brady, yeah, he's going to get worked like a part-time job, but against other guys that are, his level at welterweight, I think he could beat him. But at 185, it's just so much harder to get those wins because he's given up so much size to these guys. And now the chin, which has been a legendary part of his career and something that's still held up just by a thread on Saturday, it's starting to give way a little bit more. He got hurt by Jerry Cannonier. He got hurt multiple times by Joe Pyfer last night. So I do think there's some real cause for concern on the Kelvin Gastelum side and, something that we got to be wary of moving forward. All right. Next up, we had Bautista and Mix. Oh, I'm devastated to talk about this one. First thing is, the credit goes to Mario Bautista. I mean, he fought a great fight. He did everything he needed to do. I think that if there was one takeaway that I had from this fight on the Patchy Mix side, you never want to look past anybody. He was talking about, I'm not focused on Mario. I'm focused on what's next. And I think that mindset is not good, right? It is always faulty, and you have to respect every opponent. You have to bring your best every time out if you want to get wins at the UFC level, if you want to get wins at the highest level. And I think the last 2 fights from Patchy Mix, I did not think we saw his best. And the unfortunate reality is, I thought that the price, was off, but I thought Patchy was going to find a way to get it done. I thought he was going to be a negative EV winner, right? I thought he might lose some minutes on the feet, but find one big opportunity on the ground and get the job done. And the truth is, I did not feel he gave himself any chance to win that fight. If I'm game planning, I'm saying to myself, like, I have to find 5 grappling positions. If nothing, like if I lose this fight, let me lose it by giving myself 5 chances in the grappling, by selling out, trying to go for a back take, trying to jump on this guy, trying to jump guillotine, trying to grab a single leg, trying to fall into this guy in the clinch. I didn't see much emphasis on trying to clinch. I didn't see much emphasis on, trying to shoot from far away. Yeah, right? Sometimes you got to take a bad shot to start a wrestling and situation, right? I didn't see that. I didn't see a lot of the things that I would have expected, trying to force wrestling and grappling situations, throw a ton of kicks to the body to try and make the guy grab your leg on instinct, force a grappling situation. I didn't really see any of that. And I was really disappointed by that. So when I talk about where is Patchy, really, really talented, he's really talented on the ground. And everybody now thinks he's a bad fighter because he went out there and had a 15-minute kickboxing match where he was not the better guy. And the truth is, I didn't ever think he was going to win a 15-minute kickboxing match with Mario unless he was hurting him, because Mario throws a lot of activity. And, he's a guy that's been hurt before, right? Trevin Jones hurt him and finished him. But he's not a guy that's easy to beat up on the feet, right? He's a dangerous guy. He's a very solid fighter. He's got a lot of UFC wins and credibility. So for me, if they scheduled a grappling match, like, I still think Patchy Mix is going to out grapple Mario Bautista if they just went out there to grapple. But Mario Bautista went out there knowing it's a bad idea for me to grapple this guy, and he had better tactics, he had a better game plan, he had a better understanding of what he needed to do to win, and he set up his win condition, which is don't grapple this guy, keep him at distance, use my stuff to the body, use my stuff to the head, move around, don't get hit too hard, don't get hit too clean, don't force any exchanges you don't need to. And that's what he did. And I just did not like what I saw from Patchy in terms of either the pre-fight game planning, the mid-fight adjustments. I didn't like any of it. So the truth is, I'm a massive Patchy Mix fan. I always will be. I went and saw this guy choke out Tony Gravely years ago, and it was an impressive victory back then. And he's done a lot of impressive things in his career since. That being said, you have to know when the ship has sailed on somebody in terms of being a betting commodity. And I'm very proud of the fact that despite my fandom, I did not bet on Patchy Mix against Magomed Magomedov in the second fight. I bet on him in the first fight when he was a plus 1XX underdog and he won the fight. I bet on him as a plus 2XX underdog against Kyoji Horiguchi. But at a minus 400, at a minus 180 in your UFC debut, I'm not going to get behind those prices, right? That's buying high. That's not what I try and do. I was mistaken on the O'Malley side, but at least I can't say that's the best price you've ever gotten on Sean O'Malley in the UFC is plus 270. Now we see you got it for a reason, but I wasn't, take it. Hey, O'Malley wins a bunch of fights in a row, and then now he's a minus 300 favorite or something and loses the fight. That's when you'd feel foolish, right? In this case, I'm not buying the high on Patchy Mix. I bought when it was a good time to buy. I bought when people were out on this guy. But now that people were all in on Patchy, and a lot of people had him as parlay legs and all this stuff, respect everybody, right? I thought he was going to win the fight. But I thought you can't fade a guy like Mario Bautista unless you're getting plus money. And I bet Jose Aldo plus 118 or whatever it was against Mario Bautista. I thought he fought admirably for my money. I thought it was a split decision type scenario. I thought could have went either way. So that's the kind of bets that I'm looking for, right? A proven guy at plus money and live with the results. Shout out to Bill Fay in the chat, says Liam is back with the first look. Absolutely. Daz is giving the laughing emojis here. And listen, if you were on Mario Bautista, I want to say it was an extremely sharp bet, right? I will never take anything away from somebody who made a sharp bet. That was a great bet. But I also think that is not the best Patchy Mix. So where do I draw the line in the sand? I think people calling him a bum, people saying that he sucks and he was never any good, I think that's all a little bit disrespectful, to tell you the truth. Like, I do think when you look at Patchy Mix, you see a guy that's 20-2 as a professional. If you evaluate any fighter's body of work based on one fight, I just think you're not very serious, right? Like, if you look at somebody's body of work, what is Mario Bautista if you look at the Trevin Jones fight? No, he's a bum, except that he's won all these other fights since, right? And he's done a great job against higher quality opponents since. So you can either hold one performance against somebody or you can see how their career pans out. And for Patchy Mix, he's still 31 years of age. So I pray that he's still got something physically left to offer. He sat on the sidelines for over a year. You look at guys that were out, for the longest amount of time before their fights at UFC 316. It was Jekka Seregi, who got absolutely flatline knocked out in the first 30 seconds, and Patchy Mix. Those were the guys with the two longest layoff on the card. And Patchy Mix, by the way, did not want a layoff. He said, please get me in. Get me a fight. Please, somebody get me a fight. He was supposed to fight Ego. He tried to get fights, and he couldn't fight for a year. So he did look to me like he had two things afflicting him. And again, this is a personal opinion. I'd be curious to know what Patchy himself thinks about this. But I thought Patchy Mix was dealing with UFC jitters in the first round. I did not think that he was, I basically thought he had some stage fright. He wasn't throwing. He wasn't reacting. He wasn't moving. He wasn't attempting offense. And he wasn't trying to grab a hold of Mario either. So there was a lot missing, I felt, from the opening bell. UFC jitters explains a lot of that, in my view. But also, when you have UFC jitters and you have ring rust and you've been out for a year and you're still trying to get your feet back under you and it's not the same cage that you're used to and all the process is different and fight week's different, it's like I think that a lot of what Patchy was trying to do during fight week was talk himself into it. He was saying, I know where I'm at. I know how good I am. I'm one of the best. I could definitely do this. The matchmaking wasn't easy, right? Like if you're trying to set up Patchy for a win, you give him an old guy. You give him a guy that's got a name but not real skills behind it or maybe lacks the substance. Mario Bautista is like one of the quiet guys in the division that most people don't know about, but that most people don't want to fight because he's fucking good. So they give him a tough matchup and they say, hey, go out there on 3 weeks' notice. Show everybody what you got, kid. And he goes out there, doesn't get any takedowns, has a bad performance, objectively. Like that's just not a good performance. And now the whole 20 some odd fights he had before that are thrown out and he sucks. And it's just that for me is what's so unfortunate. A lot of people are UFC or nothing, right? Like if they didn't do it in the UFC, it doesn't count. Okay, if that's your standard, then Patchy Mix still has so much to prove. But for me, I know that he's beaten UFC level fighters before, right? Kyoji Horiguchi, Sergio Pettis, those are UFC level fighters. They're a little bit undersized, right? And Patchy Mix did what a lot of great champions have done and leveraged a massive size advantage over a division, right? John Jones, you look at the guys he fought in the light heavyweight division, they were tiny relative to him for the vast majority of his title fights, right? Then you look at the Dom Reyes fight, and he's finally fighting guys his own size, and shit doesn't look so sweet no more, right? It's like when you look at that fight, I think Patchy realized, midway through the first round, like this guy is big, he's tough, he ain't going to fucking give this to me, and he's going to be out here for the full 15. If you have to judge what is Patchy Mix's biggest vulnerability, in my humble opinion, besides the flat-footed striking, it's cardio. And it's not to say he's got bad cardio, but he sells out offensively. And when he fought Juan Archuleta, it was a 5-round fight, and he basically went out there, fought balls to the wall, and was completely gassed for the last 3 rounds, and basically got dealt to for the last 3 rounds. So 3-2, Juan Archuleta, clear win. And he just outpaced him, outlasted him, out-hustled him over 25 minutes. And when you look at the Magomedov fight, it was another example of a 5-round fight. And when Patchy was not able to get the early finish and he did sell out looking for one choke, he then started to, be a little bit more, what's the right word for it? Conservative with his offense. He did not want to put out too much and gas himself out. He had been there before, right? Against Kyoji Horiguchi, he was much more conservative with his offense and how much he threw out there because he didn't want to gas himself out. And I think Mario Bautista pushed a pace that Patchy realized is not sustainable for him. So instead of moving his feet a lot and, trying to wrestle or grapple, he relied on his toughness and his durability and took a lot of clean shots. And I just did not really think that that was the way that he had to take that performance. And did he land a couple shots of his own? Yeah, he did. But did he get outclassed on the feet? Yes, he did. And I think that Patchy is a better fighter than he showed, but now it's on him. He's got to go out there and show it. when you look back, I try and talk about some examples of guys that come over that are good fighters and they don't have success when they first get here. I think Eddie Alvarez is like the number one example that comes to mind, because Eddie Alvarez, guys, was so hyped. The underground king, everybody loved the guy coming in. Donald Cerrone certainly was like a fringe title level guy in the lightweight division, but he was mostly a big name. He went on streaks. He had some good wins, but he was mostly a big name. He went out there and beat Eddie, right? And that fight, you're like, wow, maybe Eddie isn't who we thought he was. He found calf kicks in the UFC. He started getting beat up by calf kicks. Maybe this guy isn't for real, I remember that dialogue that came out after that fight. Eddie Alvarez, maybe he's not who we thought he was. What happened? Eddie Alvarez, 3 fights later, knocks out Rafael Dos Anjos in the first round, claims that UFC title belt. So Patchy Mick's story is not over, but he needs to show a better product than what he showed last night if he wants to beat top 15 guys in the UFC. Because the simple reality is, as much as I like Patchy Mix, you like Patchy Mix, anybody likes Patchy Mix, that performance wasn't going to cut it, right? That performance was never going to beat Mario Bautista. So I hope and pray that we're going to see a better performance next time out from Patchy. Still a huge fan of his. I'll always be a fan of the memories. I will always have a lot of respect for his body of work. But at the end of the day, your record are, you are what your record says you are in this fighting sports stuff. And there's times where you can add context and this and that, but the better man won the fight. There was no doubt about that on the night. So Patchy's got some work to do, right? He said he wants to be the best in the world. Last night, he was not the best in the world. So let's see if he can bridge that gap. Let's see if he can make those changes. I do think there's some endemic parts of his game, like the flat-footedness, that would need like huge overhauls in order to make him a more functional striker. But maybe the idea is, hey, let's not make him a more functional striker. Let's get back to wrestling, aggressively from the opening bell to try and get these guys into our world, which is grappling. And you can't show your best skills, which is world-class grappling, if you don't get the fight to the ground, right? And we've seen a million times in the UFC guys with great jiu-jitsu that struggled because they could not get fights to the mat. And I think that that's where Patchy Mix should be devoting all of his focus and attention, in my personal opinion. I'm just a man with a show, right? But if I was coaching up Patchy Mix, I'd be like, hey, listen, man, your grappling is absolutely world-class. So let's not stand here striking with guys, no matter who they are, right? Like, let's use our striking at most as a means to an end, where we're using it kind of like Merab, pressuring forward, right? Throwing to get a hold of somebody and then trying to rip them to the ground. I think if Patchy did that, he's going to give himself a way better chance to win. So let's give Patchy somebody who is, a little bit lower in the division, right? And I think let's see where he's at there. Maybe a Rob Font, maybe a, let's think. I think Kyler Phillips is fighting Lockdog. I think that Lockdog is going to win that fight. There's a first look for you. I think Lockdog's super impressive. I've been, buying Lockdog stock throughout his UFC run, so to speak. I think I had him against Ricky Simone as a +2XX underdog, for example. So I think Lockdog will win that fight. I would love to see, a Kyler Phillips, a Rob Font, somebody in that maybe 9 to 15 range. And let's see Patchy get that opportunity. Right now, Mario Bautista deserves to take a step up in the division. Song Yadong, I think, is a name that comes to mind. Maybe let's go look at the matchmaking that I did. So here we go. I'm going to share this with you guys real quick. Matchmaking post UFC 316, and you guys can tell me what you think. These are my stuff from X at LiamPicksFights. You guys can always find me there. Merab versus Corey Sandhagen. I think that one is just so obvious. We got to go with that one. Merab wants it. Corey wants it. Corey earned it. I don't like to see just rematch after rematch after rematch. We don't need to see the Umar rematch, for example, until he earns the rematch. We didn't need to see the Sean rematch until he earned it. But the difference was he had done a favor for the UFC. They owed him a favor. Favor's been repaid. O'Malley against Henry Cejudo. I think that makes a ton of sense. When you look at Cejudo coming off of a loss, where is he at? O'Malley coming off of a loss, 2 losses now, both of them against Merab, kind of audits. Find out where he's at, maybe test his wrestling a little bit against Cejudo, see how that works out. I like that. Harrison against Nunes, obvious fight. No need to discuss it, really. That's the only fight to make at 135 right now. Pyfer, against the winner of Kopylov and Costa. I think that's a great fight. It's going to tell us a lot about both guys. And Pyfer, has earned another step up in competition by beating Kelvin. You look at Gastelum, I said the Marc-Andre Barrio fight. Batista, Song Yadong, 5-rounder. Let's get a main event booked with these two guys. Let's get, a power puncher to test the durability of Mario Bautista. And let's get a cardio machine with some pretty good grappling in Bautista to test some of the, liabilities of Song Yadong. I think that that's a fascinating fight. I think we'd get great answers about both guys. And, the winner's at least one fight away from a title shot, if not qualified for a title shot right there. So I like that fight. Then Patchy Mix against Kyler Phillips. I did not know that Kyler Phillips was booked at the time when I made this tweet. But like I said, I think he's going to lose to Lockdog. So let's go Mix against Kyler, Mix against Rob Font. I like either of those ideas. Shout out to my guy Jewish Better. I think he had mentioned the Rob Font idea. I like that one. Then you look at Holland, and I think Covington is a great fight. I think it's a great call out. I would love to see Holland beat him up. I think he would beat him up. I think Covington has earned that beatdown, for all the trash talk he's done over the years. So that would be cool. Otherwise, out of left field, let's do the rematch, guys. Both these guys fought at 185. Holland, Neal. Neal said that Holland's the hardest puncher he's ever fought. Last time out, he got an injury win over RDA. It didn't really tell us much. Let's find out if Jeff Neal is better now than he was on the regional scene. Give him the same guy he lost to before. Can he do something different? Can he mix in the wrestling? Can he go out there, show a little different element of his game? I'd like to see that. Then, Luque, Leach. Why not, right? For me, Luque, Leach, they're both guys that are coming off some losses, a little bit past it. Maybe the durability's starting to go, but fun guys, action guys, willing to go out there and put it on the line. I think that Leach could get caught in a choke against Luque. Luque's a dangerous grappler. I think that either guy could bonk each other on the chin. I think it would be a great action fight. So for me, that is the way that I am, thinking about matchmaking these fighters post UFC 316. I think Kevin Holland will go back to the Tapology. Showed a good product last night. Went out there, landed big shots, hurt Vicente Luque, busted him up, lumped his head up, and got the win. Holland has struggled at times as a UFC favorite, so I always have my doubts when he's coming in as a favorite. His performances at times are inconsistent, but I think at 170, he's a force to be reckoned with. I've mentioned that before. I think he's a completely different guy at 170, and in this fight, he showed it, goes out there, submits a guy who's very difficult to submit. You go look at Vicente Luque's career, guys. He's been submitted 3 times, okay? But look at this. Last time he got submitted before this weekend was against Carlos Pereira in 2013, all right? He had not been submitted since 2013, so a 12-year gap between submission losses for Vicente Luque. And, impressive by Kevin Holland. The guy has very good offensive jiu-jitsu. We've already known that. We've always known that. And we saw defensive jiu-jitsu against Gunnar Nelson, right? Gunnar Nelson, very dangerous, savvy black belt, had Kevin in bad positions. Kevin was able to scramble, get back up to his feet, show a lot of the right heart, skill, determination, everything he needed to do to win the fight. So I think that Kevin is showing a better product at 170. And I think if he goes out there and fights Colby Covington, he's going to knock him the fuck out. So give me Kevin in that fight and book it. I'd love to see it. Next up, guys, Joshua Van took on Bruno Silva. This fight went exactly how we predicted it on the show. We basically thought Bruno Silva, tough guy, good fighter, solid. He just was going to get outworked, outpaced by a younger man unless he was able to clip him, unless he was able to get that black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, pop that off. He just was going to be in Schitt's Creek without a paddle against Josh Van because Josh Van, Cody Durden was getting ahead on the strike count against Bruno Silva, and then he got clipped, right? And then he got hit with big shots and got hurt. Josh Van was always going to get ahead on the strike count. This guy is like going out there to put up 100+ significant strikes per fight, unless you go down or he goes down or something goes crazy. Because this guy is throwing nonstop, coming forward, putting volume on you, and he's creative, man. He'll put stuff in combination. He'll go with the feet. He'll go with the hands. He'll go with elbows and knees. He's not afraid. He does not discriminate. So this guy, extremely dangerous fighter. I've said before he's got a championship ceiling in the UFC. I have no doubt in my mind after that performance, the guy gets better fight over fight. He fights frequently. He's 23 years old, guys. He's got 7 fights already in the UFC coming into this weekend. Now he's got 7 wins in the UFC. His only loss against Charles Johnson, a very solid guy. So Josh Van deserves quality ranked opposition. I think he called for Brandon Moreno. my man wants to go all the way deep into them murky waters, but are you going to count him out now? I won't. This kid's dangerous everywhere, period, point blank. So if he wants Moreno, give him Moreno. Otherwise, I think basically any top-ranked flyweight opposition is fine, because Josh Van is showing he's ready for prime time right now. Maybe if it was me, if I was running the show, I would take him along just a tiny bit slower, where I would bring him up and get him another quality but winnable opponent. Otherwise just get him back in the deep end, and you have a young man. You could easily rebuild this man if things don't work out in his next fight. But if he's ready for prime time right now, sky's the limit. Shoot him off to the moon. He's going off as a minus 700 favorite against solid fighters and then beating them up badly. So that Joshua Van is a serious guy. 23 years old, man. Him and Michael Aswell putting on for Texas MMA. Shout out to those guys. Beasts. Speaking of, Asmat Mirzakhanov, what is this guy? One fight away from a title shot? He's 36. He hardly ever fights in the UFC, fights once a year. But when he shows up, man, he's here to murk people. He's here to put guys away, put hands on them, hurt them. And he did it once again to Brundage. Not a competitive fight, really. Like, Brenson had some of the right ideas. He was moving his feet. He was trying to touch him with the kicks. He was trying to be mobile. But Asmat Mirzakhanov, patient destruction. It's hard to say patient about a fight that lasted this long, but seriously, he just walks him down, puts his stuff out there, move and flow and very loose. And when he puts hands on guys, it's a problem. So put hands on him. He went down, finished the job on the ground, never let him off the hook. Asmat Mirzakhanov, man. I think he's one fight away from a title shot, even though he's 36. And I don't think the UFC would be thrilled about that, but they don't have a bounty of challengers at 205. And what does this guy do? He knocks people out, what is it? 5 wins in the UFC, 4 knockouts. Let's double check that. Yeah, that's exactly right. And the one that he didn't finish was against Dustin Jacoby. So, I think that Asmat Mirzakhanov simply needs to be fighting, either a top 5 guy or Ankalaev, let's just find out how good this guy is, because he's clearly a good fighter, but he's not very active, and he's already 36. He's not getting any younger. So let's either give him the opportunity or not. But, otherwise he's just going to keep killing off contenders, man. Not that Brenson Iberio fits that category, but like Dustin Jacoby, a solid fighter, knocked him off. Alonzo Menifield, a ranked guy, knocked him off. So let's go out there and give this guy the fights that he's earned, at the top of the division. Also, shout out to him. He put on for K Dojo Tribe and the great state of New Jersey. Home performance there for the guy. Oh, we got to talk about UFC judging. Consistently bad is the judging. This I did not think was a good decision. I thought Sergey Spivak deserved the win here. 30-year-old loses to a 33-year-old. So, I don't even know that it's a promotional bias, so to speak, but Salsa Boy, maybe a little more marketable, has fewer losses on the resume, and they end up giving him the win. It was a close fight. I'm not going to say it was a blowout. It was a 30-27 Spivak. What were they thinking? Not that, but I thought Sergey Spivak had a better argument in round 1. I thought he did clearly win the 3rd round. Not to say it was a blowout in the 3rd round, but I thought he had won the 3rd round. I was confident in that. I thought that round 1 was a close round that probably went Spivak's way. I would have figured, at least 2 judges are going to give Spivak that first round. And then, the 2nd round I thought was a Waldo round. So I was like, you know what? 29-28, either guy I could live with, but I think Spivak deserves to win. And, 30-27 Waldo, I didn't think that was a very serious scorecard. So at the end of the day, I thought it was not only a poorly judged contest, I thought it was a horrifically officiated contest. Several times, Waldo grabbed the fence, grabbed a hold of the top of the fence, put his arm around the fence, things that are just blatant cheating. And I tweeted it during the fight. I was like, Waldo is cheating his ass off this entire fight. And he did. He was not taking a point. And ultimately, that was big, right? Because he doesn't lose a point. He cheats several times to prevent takedowns. And then he wins a close, thin margin striking fight with Sergey Spivak. I did not think Waldo was a particularly sharp bet either, but God bless. Cash it if you had it. When you go to a close decision, I don't think Spivak was a sharp bet either, to be clear. But I think you were getting very thin margins on Waldo, and Spivak was a bad chocolate. I think it was a pick 'em, honestly, in hindsight, because Waldo's willing to cheat and slightly more effective and better optics on the feet, but I thought Sergey Spivak actually did better work largely on the feet. So weird fight. Next up, we talked about Andreas Gustafsson was live to win a decision here, and that's exactly what he did. Basically, I thought to myself, like, what is to stop this guy from coming forward and pushing this guy in the clinch and just making it an ugly 15-minute decision? Chaos Williams doesn't have a lot of baseline MMA skills. He's just a good athlete. He knows how to win fights by putting people on the other end of that 1-2, hurting them, throwing the calf kick, throwing a decent amount of volume, but there's not a great amount of sophistication to it. And his grappling, his wrestling has always been a little bit suspect in my view. And in this fight, his grappling wasn't really the problem. His wrestling was a big problem. His infighting, his ability to dig underhooks, his ability to dictate clinch exchanges was not fully there. He did a decent job early in the fight, spinning off with his hips and stuff like that, but he was using a lot of energy because he wasn't doing it properly. He wasn't being efficient. He wasn't digging inside underhooks. If you guys watched, I did a live fight companion watch along. I'm going to start doing more of those on the channel. So if that's something you'd enjoy, make sure you hit the subscribe button. But I was talking about digging underhooks, getting inside. It's a wrestling skill. You need it, right? In order to get guys off you at this level in MMA, when they're pushing you against the fence, you need to be able to get into this thin space in between you and them and pry open the space with an underhook. That's what you need to do. And Chaos was not being very efficient with his underhooks. He was not being very sophisticated with his pummeling strategies at all. So that left Gustafsson in a position where he was going 3 knees to 1 against Chaos in the clinch. And that's a fight he's very comfortable with. And on top of that, he looks for opportunities to land elbows. He's not afraid to get hit. Like, one thing that is an absolute game changer for a fighter is fearlessness. Andreas Gustafsson is not afraid of getting knocked out. I can just tell you, most people don't want to be knocked out, right? They would rather lose a decision than, risk getting knocked out in the fight, right? Getting knocked out is embarrassing, right? But at the end of the day, Andreas Gustafsson has no fear about getting knocked out. He comes forward, puts his chin on the line, gets into crazy exchanges. He's not afraid of any of it. He's willing to live with the consequences. If you knock me out, so be it. He took chances against Chaos Williams, and Chaos was getting overwhelmed by the pressure, by the tenacity, by the come forward attitude, and the fact that this guy was not going to give it to him in any way. He was like, you have to kill me with one of your punches, so good luck, or I'm going to kill you. I'm going to throw my big punches. I'm going to grab a hold of you. I'm going to push you back to the fence. He did it all, and he did it for the full 15 minutes. So this guy is clearly dangerous, powerful, physical, knows his game plan. Like I said, sometimes it's just knowing how you win fights. He knows how he wins fights. Grab a hold of this guy, beat him up. Don't let him have a free, easy win at distance. Make him work the whole time. These are the kind of guys you do not want to sign to fight. Guys that are willing to sign up to put on a hard hat, go to work for 15 minutes in the worst way, in the grimiest trenches. He is a trench fighter. Gustafsson, going to be a tough out for a lot of guys, and that plus money was really sharp. That decision line was really sharp. Knew some guys that were on it. Hats off to you. Chaos Williams, was 6-3 in the UFC. He's not a bad fighter. And Andreas Gustafsson came in and just audited him, made him look like he was not on this level. Next up, this fight was really disappointing. Kong Wang continues to not show the best finishing instinct. She had Lipski on one leg for most of the fight. Lipski missing weight by a huge margin was not very conducive to me being bullish on her chances. And then when you saw the fight, I did not like her effort. I did not love what I saw from her in that fight. She landed some shots. She fought okay, but I'm just not very bullish on her future moving forward. And I would say the same about Kong. She's good. She's clearly a good striker, but I still have real question marks about this woman and her finishing instincts, her decision-making. So yeah, I think she's good, but I still have questions. Nothing you could say except knockout of the year candidate. Ju Sang Yu took Jekka Seregi to the cleaners, hit him with a check left hook as he was going backwards, and Jekka was out flat, face down, fell stiff as a board. It was one of the knockouts of the year. Mauricio Rufy hit Bobby Green with a beautiful spin kick to the head, but this is right up there, man. If it's not number 1, it's number 2 for me, and just unbelievable knockout, moving backwards. Jekka is an Indonesian kickboxer. If you were to say, like, where is he bad? It's on the ground. That's his real problem. he went out there, tried to get after his opponent early on the feet, land something. In my opinion, his best chance to win was to knock this guy out. And he got spilt badly early. Like that was as big of an indictment as you could get, because Jusang Yu, I think, would have won if the fight got extended. I think he would have won if the fight went to the ground. So to also be able to knock him out brutally early, quickly on the feet, it just meant that the right guy was favored by a huge amount. Hats off to Jusang Yu. Guy's ready for UFC primetime right now. And I don't want to take this and extrapolate it out. It's like, this guy's the next best thing in martial arts, but we'll see how they matchmake him moving forward. Korean Zombie's protege, and put somebody out bad, trained with Stun Gun Academy back in the day. The guy's been in proximity to good UFC fighters for a while. And when you, if you look back at my breakdowns, my analysis that I did, after I looked into this fight, I was not bullish on who Jekka was training with relative to Jusang Yu. Jusang Yu was training with Holloway, freaking Korean Zombie, Stun Gun, and Jekka Sergey was training with, just a lower caliber of fighter in California. And it's not to say they're bad fighters. They're pros, but they're not high-level UFCs. And it's like, that's what Jusang Yu was exposing himself to, high-level UFC pro fighters. And that's something I'm always looking for in my handicapping, is who you're training with. And it doesn't always equate out, right? Patchy Mix trains with the best guys in the world, make no mistake. Marab and Aljo included, right? But at the end of the day, you got to go fight, your fight. And Jusang Yu went out there and fought his fight and did it very well. And he looks like a problem moving forward. So we'll have to watch that space. I will say he gets hit clean on the chin a couple of times on his regional footage, but in those fights, his chin looked dynamite. So we'll have to see if somebody with real power can test him. But Jekka's a power guy, and he didn't even have a chance, bro. He was already spilled. All right, guys, we're at the second, fight of the night from last night, and it was Quillan Salkild taking on Yano Ashmus. I thought Yano Ashmus made a really good account of himself. He was another K-Dojo guy. The problem was he was behind in the wrestling for too long. So he was behind in the wrestling in the first 2 rounds. He actually landed a pretty big shot at the end of round 1. If that had swung the round in his favor, it could have been a different result here. But ultimately, Quillan did the better work for the majority of the first 10 minutes. In the third round, the pressure, the power, the cardio was starting to, be tested, right? We saw that Yano Ashmus was cracking him with some shots, he was the smaller guy by a big margin, but his willingness to keep getting back up to his feet, to keep defending. I thought Quillan showed a lot of really good skills in this fight, but he did show some of the same vulnerabilities that he showed against Gage Young. When he can't get the takedowns, if he's not able to hold you down, if he's not able to stay on top, he will get into some contentious striking exchanges where he can get clipped, where he can get hit, where he can get hurt. And, he's a tough guy. He's a good fighter. Perth, you got a good one. He's a tough kid, man. At 25, sky's the limit for where he's going to be. But the way he's been fighting, you get the right pressure guy in front of this guy, it's going to be a problem. I think pressure is the way to get to Quillan Salkild. If you look at Gage Young, when he had success, it was coming forward, standing your ground, using pressure, backing him up. Different fighter on the front foot than the back foot, Quillan Salkild. So that, I think, is where you have to take this guy. He's too big, too athletic, too long, throws too much, shoots too many takedowns to let him back you up. You have to go out there and back him up. So we'll see if somebody's able to do that. Yano was not able to do that enough, but he tried, and he showed some of the same vulnerabilities that Gage Young showed. I would say he maybe did a better job in the wrestling, but Gage did a better job in some of the striking exchanges. So it was an interesting fight, though. And I thought both guys made a good account of themselves. They fought hard. And I actually predicted Quillan Salkild by decision. So I was thinking that Yano Ashmus was going to be a plus EV loser, and that's kind of what I think you got out of that one. He was a good fighter, but he ultimately was going to come up short more often than not based on the level of activity, the volume that he's simply able to put out there over 15 minutes. Oh, and guys, this one I was dead wrong about. Mark Chowinski is a guy that is easy to root for. He's got a great story, but he was not ready for the UFC, in my view, or maybe it was UFC jitters. I'm not quite sure, but we saw some questionable decision-making. We saw a toughness that is undeniable. The low kicks were really getting to him. They were eating him up, and I think maybe that took out some of the ability to stand on 2 legs that he needed to wrestle hard, but ultimately, you know, when he tried to wrestle with Markel, he got one easy double leg. He got on his back multiple times, but I did not think we saw a comprehensive enough effort to get the fight there. And when he did get the fight there, I did not think that we saw enough instincts for how to finish a fight, you know, at this level. I thought that Chawinski in his regional footage was kind of keeping his cards closer to the vest with his wrestling and his grappling, you know, but at the end of the day, some of that regional footage was instructive. He does not push his wrestling and his grappling enough in his fights. And he showed that in this fight with Markel. The biggest the biggest liability that Medeiros has shown in the UFC is getting controlled for 7 minutes by Austin Hubbard on 2 takedowns. And Mark Chawinski really only was shooting in the later portions of these rounds for the most part. And that for me was really disappointing. Now, that being said, he had a couple moments, he had a couple opportunities. Medeiros is a future fade, in my opinion. He's 28 years of age, so he could continue to get better. But what I've seen from this guy is many, many huge mistakes in the grappling, not showing enough finishing instincts. His leg kicks were good. I think he did one illegal stomp, but overall, the pressure with the leg kicks was good. But man, this guy just gives his opponents a lot of opportunities. And like, he's kind of been getting bailed out by opponents making mistakes when they have him in horrible positions, giving up his back, giving up terrible spots. And I don't think that's going to last long in the UFC. If you continue to give opponents your back, you will get finished by a higher level opponent. So Chawinski, I said, was an above average blue belt, and I still stand by that. He's good enough for a blue belt for sure, but he definitely does not have it all ironed out for the UFC level. Yeah, he's got a lot to work on. And Markel Medeiros on the other side, more UFC ready product, but I do believe that he will be found out as he moves up in this journey. He just has too many glaring flaws in his game right now. So on the feet, the kid's got good calf kicks, decent fundamental boxing, was better than Chawinski in those regards. But when Chawinski would just fire, just throw offense on the feet, come forward and attempt, he was having some success. And again, I think against a more dangerous opponent, that could be a problem for Medeiros. So that's all I got for you guys. We have talked about the upcoming UFC Atlanta card. We circled back. We did some talking about the fights that just transpired at UFC 316, broke those down, did some future matchmaking as well. So I hope that you guys have enjoyed the first look. I'm going to try and get back to these a little bit more often. Shout out to Bill Fay in the chat, says Liam, back with the first look. Absolutely. Have a sip to that. And ultimately, my goal is always to just bring good content to you guys. So I'll be right back at it with Bets and Banter this week. We'll have Wiz back on the show. Lord willing, we'll talk to him, see what his schedule looks like. But that's the plan for this week, is to come back with Bets and Banter after I've done all my research, after I get all my tape study done, and we'll have a more informed opinion for you along the way. But hope that you guys have enjoyed the dialogue. I know that I did. God bless. Good luck. Enjoy the fights. Come back next time. We're having all the same fun again. Make sure you like and subscribe on the way out. Thank you all so much for the time. Take care, everybody.